University of Minnesota Board of Regents meeting on May 10th, 2013. Please come to order. All right, we have lots of recognitions today, and so those are the first item on our agenda. So President Kaler, please come and join me at the podium.
Madam Chair and members of the board, it's my great pleasure to honor Mark Rotenberg this morning. Mark, would you please come join us? General Counsel Rotenberg is leaving us after more than decades of transforming our Office of General Counsel into the finest in higher education. He has been a wonderful public servant, a tireless advocate for the university, and a leading member of the Twin Cities legal community. As the Minnesota Daily, one of my favorite newspapers, headlined last week, he has been on the front lines and in just about always has stood victorious for the U. We will miss Mark's tenacity and counsel as he moves on to Johns Hopkins University. We wish him, his wife Amy, and his entire family all the best in Baltimore. Mark, thank you for all you've done to keep the University of Minnesota great. Madam Chair.
Well, congratulations, Mark, and I get to read the Certificate of Appreciation from the Regents of the University of Minnesota. The Regents of the University of Minnesota recognize with sincere appreciation the exceptional dedication and contributions of Mark B. Rotenberg, General Counsel. An accomplished litigator and partner in one of Minnesota's most distinguished law firms, Mark joined the university as general counsel in 1992. During his tenure, Mark has provided invaluable advice to the Board of Regents, 4 presidents, numerous senior leaders on challenging and complex matters facing higher education. These include the multi-year federal investigations within the medical school, the football stadium naming rights agreement with TCF Bank, and the extended negotiations with the Metropolitan Council on the Central Corridor Light Rail Transit project. Mark has been an extraordinarily effective advocate of the university's legal interests. He has personally and successfully argued cases in the United States Supreme Court and the Minnesota Supreme Court. The university's litigation record during Mark's tenure has been remarkable, with a success rate of over 90% and a recovery of over $580 million. Mark leaves the university as the longest-serving general counsel in the Big Ten. Early in his career, Mark served at the top levels of the U.S. Department of Justice, which instilled in him a deep belief that the role of the attorney for a public institution includes not only counsel and advocacy, but also action to ensure the institution follows the law and promptly remedies errors. As only one example of his contributions, Mark developed an athletics compliance office widely regarded as one of the best in the nation. He also retained, recruited, and developed one of the finest offices of general counsel in the country, with a staff committed to the same standards of excellence and integrity that he exemplifies. On behalf of the University of Minnesota community, the Regents extend their respect and deepest gratitude to Mark B. Rotenberg for his outstanding service to the university. We wish him personal and professional fulfillment in his future endeavors. Mark, we wish you all the best. And thank you. And now I'd like Mark to make a few remarks.
Thank you, Chair Cohen and President Kaler, for those very generous remarks. I want to say first that I was trying to figure it out last night, I've probably attended about 200 individual board meetings over the years, 3 this week alone. But it's the first board meeting that my wife Amy and my son Matthew have ever attended. And when I invited her to the meeting, she says, well, better now than never. So I've spoken so many times at board meetings, it almost doesn't matter, I don't think, to the board or anyone else what I say here this morning, although I do have one more thing to talk with you about later today. We've spoken about a lot of things over the years, and even this week. We've talked about intellectual property lawsuits. We've talked about polluted university land. We've talked about coaches' buyouts. Privileged conversations, Jenna. We've talked, and we'll talk this morning about serving alcohol during NFL games on campus. The diversity of our office's work on behalf of the Board of Regents is quite vast, and of course, I don't do this alone. I'm simply sent out in front to speak about and represent the outstanding work of my staff, and I'll save all of that for next week when I may have an opportunity to talk about that. You know, a lot has changed for the Board of Regents, and some of you may not be aware or be thinking about it this morning, but I am, since this is the last of many dozens of meetings that I've been privileged to attend. When I started, your meetings were in Morrill Hall. They were in what we now say called 238 Morrill Hall, if you can believe that. The committee rooms are at that beat-up table in room 300. Operationally, the board's functions have evolved tremendously over time under the leadership of 11 separate and Board of Regents chairs and 3 executive secretaries, Barb Meesing, Ann Cieslak, and Brian Steeves, all of whom have provided outstanding service to the Board of Regents during my period here. Policy making and governance has been dramatically improved. I've seen all kinds of issues for the board in many different contexts and situations. I've seen board members elated and ecstatic over accomplishments of the university. I've seen board members in tears in my office. I've seen board members forced from office. I've seen board members run for the Senate and the Minnesota Supreme Court. I've seen regents laugh and cry and be proud and be disappointed. But mostly I've seen regents who are extraordinarily dedicated people who are trying their best to govern this university under the constitutional charter. And I say govern the university because that's the phrase that's used in the charter twice. The charter says that the government of the university is vested in a board of 12 regents. And it says that the regents shall make laws for the government of the university. That's what I've seen. That's what I've experienced. The board struggling amidst political upheavals, dramatic changes in higher education to govern the university in the public interest. I've been so honored to have had the privilege for 20 years to serve as an attorney for this body. I've developed so many warm and supportive and actually fun relationships with many of you and your predecessors. You won't be surprised to know that there are lots of characters on the Board of Regents. I often think that the only reason I wasn't removed years ago as a regent is that I know too much about many of you. And that's where it's going to stay. In fact, one regent just moments ago said that I should write a book about all of this. And I said, well, I'd like to, but I'd be disbarred. So I've tried my best to counsel individual regents on the many questions they have every day, including today, to assist the board to help them understand their constitutional role and responsibility, to help them clarify their intentions and their will in properly drafted policies and resolutions, and ultimately to help them be accountable to the people of Minnesota for the university we love so much. Thank you very much.
And one more round of applause and of appreciation for our General Counsel. Another very different and important component of fulfilling the governance role of the Board of Regents is input from our high-caliber group of student representatives. We look to them for advice and guidance, not quite in the same way as our General Counsel, but advice and guidance from the student perspective, and their thoughtful comments are invaluable. I'm going to tell you a little bit about each representative and then ask them to come to the podium individually for a photo and remain at the front of the room so we can get a group photo of all student representatives at the conclusion. Melissa Erlandson from Rochester. Is Melissa not here? I'll just quickly read about Melissa. Melissa is a junior from White Bear Lake, Minnesota, and she's finishing her first term as a student representative. She is pursuing a Bachelor of Health Sciences degree and will continue to work towards her degree next year. Melissa is not able to join us today. Kyle Kroll, Twin Cities, Minnesota Student Association. Kyle is a senior from Pillager, Minnesota, is completing his first term as a student representative. Kyle is an active member of the Twin Cities campus and serves in many capacities with the Minnesota Student Association. He will graduate with a degree in entrepreneurial management and philosophy this spring and begin law school at the University of Minnesota this fall. Kyle, thank you for coming to the podium.
Thank you.
Joshua Preston Morris. I think Joshua is not able to be here. Joshua is a senior originally from Montevideo, Minnesota, and is completing his first term as a student representative. He is very involved on campus, serving in various advocacy and community organizing roles in the Morris community and throughout the state of Minnesota. Joshua is majoring in political science and will graduate this spring. So a round of applause for Joshua. Mike Schmidt, Twin Cities, Minnesota Student Association, and Mike also is not able to be here this morning. He's a sophomore originally from St. Cloud, Minnesota, and completing his first term as a student rep. He was recently elected student body president of the Twin Cities campus. Mike is a student in the Carlson School of Management, studying finance and supply chain management. Molly Tumford, Duluth. Molly, a senior originally from Osceola, Wisconsin, is completing her second term as a student representative, first as vice chair. She is majoring in marketing at the Labovitz School of Business and Economics and will graduate this spring. Molly will begin her position as an executive team lead with Target Corporation this summer. Molly, congratulations. Cody Mickle, Twin Cities Graduate and Professional Student Association. Cody, a graduate student originally from Bloomer, Wisconsin, is completing his first term as a student representative, first as chair. He is pursuing a PhD in higher education administration in the College of Education and Human Development. He has been heavily involved in GAPSA and graduate student governance issues over the past several years. He also serves as an instructor in the Department of Kinesiology. Cody, thank you and congratulations. Megan Mason, Twin Cities Graduate and Professional Student Association. Megan, a graduate student, is studying epidemiology in the School of Public Health and is completing her first term as a student representative, first as vice chair. Megan, congratulations. Jesse Jennings from Crookston. And I don't think Jesse is here. Jesse's a sophomore originally from Robbinsdale, Minnesota, and completing his first term. He is majoring in criminal justice and hopes to pursue a graduate degree in the future. You all have contributed greatly to the success of the University of Minnesota. To those leaving, best of wishes, and to those staying, we look forward to working with you on with continued success. Thank you so much. Now, please. I now would like a motion to approve the minutes. Is there a motion? Thank you. A second? It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes. Is there any discussion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. The next item is President Kaler. I'd like you to share your report with us today.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board. Good morning. Today is the last day of classes at our Duluth, Rochester, and Twin Cities campuses, with finals set to begin on Monday. In Crookston, finals wrap up today. The 50th commencement in the history of our Morris campus will be celebrated tomorrow, and the very first members of our U of M Rochester graduating class will receive their diplomas next Saturday, May 18th. I extend my congratulations to the students and their families, and also to Chancellor Lemkuhl, the architect of that success story. Meanwhile, the legislative session, which will affect, among other things, our hoped-for tuition freeze and MnDRIVE research initiative, must by law conclude on May 20th, just 10 days from now. And the experts in our Soil, Water, and Climate Department assure me that the snow season is over. So we're coming to some significant finish lines for the 2012-13 academic year, and I thank you for your support during these past 12 rigorous and vigorous months. And before we run through the tape at the finish line, let me detail for you all of the moving about I've been doing over the past 2 months since we last met as a board. I began student office hours, as I pledged to do in my State of the University address in February, and so far I've met with students on our Twin Cities campus 3 times and in Crookston and Morris. They've come in asking about the transparency of our budget process and about tuition, about our mental health resources and plans to start a food co-op near campus. One young man, Connor McCarthy, during his first meeting with me, asked me to help him with a short video for a job interview he was about to have for a summer account management internship. I was happy to do that, and 2 weeks later, at my next office hours, he showed up to tell me he'd gotten his job with an advertising agency in New York. That's fun. My Crookston student meetings took place as we celebrated Chancellor Wood's inauguration, and I thank many of you for joining me there on a travel season that was a little bit challenging. I met with students at Morris when Karen and I attended the exceptional 35th Annual Morris Jazz Festival, and I thank Chancellor Johnson for being such a gracious host. Over the past 8 weeks, I have, among other things, visited members of our congressional delegation in Washington, D.C. when I was there for the annual meeting of presidents of the Association of American Universities. Met via conference call with all of the Big Ten presidents and chancellors to approve the new conference alignment and scheduling issues. And today I'm meeting with the Big Ten Commissioner Jim Delaney later today in the Twin Cities. I spoke to the world's largest medical device conference on our Twin Cities campus, the campus where the pacemaker was first used and where an industry that now has more than 29,000 employees in Minnesota was born. I continued my work in helping to close the achievement gap with Generation Next, which I co-chair, and by speaking to and bragging about the early childhood education work we do at the university at an important Caring for Kids initiative gathering in Wayzata, where Chair Cohen joined me. I interviewed candidates for the critical position of Vice Provost for Student Affairs. And being completely unable to shed my engineering identity, I hosted the regional meeting of the National Academy of Engineering, during which we showed off the university's roster of experts on a wide variety of topics. I signed an agreement for us to extend our partnership with Tokyo Technology Institute, one of Japan's top institutions of higher education. Among other groups, I met with and spoke to members of the Minnesota Business Partnership to strengthen our relationship with them, to a large gathering of the Metro-North Chamber of Commerce, in which I detailed how the University of Minnesota helps supply the top flight talent force needed statewide. Last Friday, I spoke to our medical school graduates about all the challenges and public service opportunities they face. And I'm headed to UMD and to our Twin Cities College of Liberal Arts commencements next week. And as a recruiter-in-chief, I met with young members of the Future Farmers of America on our St. Paul campus at their statewide convention, urging all of them to come and attend the university. We do have a broad and deep impact, and we touch just about every aspect of Minnesota life. Meanwhile, yesterday we recognized students and faculty for many fellowships, awards, and honors. To me, 4 especially stand out this academic year. Chemical engineering and material science professor Renata Winskovich was elected a fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. Ecologist Sarah Hobby, a professor in the College of Biological Sciences, was elected to the National Academy of Sciences. Dr. Bruce Blazer in our medical school was elected to the Institute of Medicine, and Dean Steve Crouch of CSE was elected to the National Academy of Engineering. There are 4 significant academic honoring societies in the country. We elected members to all 4 this year, which makes us one of only 4 universities in the entire nation to have faculty selected to all of those societies this past academic year. The other 3, Stanford, Chicago, and UCLA. Only 2 public universities in such a gold medal winning company, and we're one of them. So that, my friends, I think is an academic grand slam, and in keeping with my goal of promoting the excellence of our world-class scholars on our faculty. Let me turn to athletics. Speaking of Grand Slams, our agreement, that was a segue I thought you would like, but not so much. Our agreement to have the Vikings play at TCF Stadium was considered by the Facilities and Operations Committee yesterday and was unanimously advanced to the board for action later this morning. I thank General Counsel Rotenberg and Vice President Wheelock for their incredibly hard work on closing that deal. Our Gopher football team has upgraded its schedule for 2014 and 15 with games against Texas Christian University. That move closes the loop on our outstanding scheduling issues created by the North Carolina cancellations, and it closes the financial loop, too. We've not only recouped the $800,000 we paid to North Carolina, we're coming out $100,000 to the good. We hired a talented, experienced, energetic, and youthful new men's basketball coach in Richard Pitino. Let me turn to Title IX and a report in yesterday's Minnesota Daily. I'll begin by stating my unequivocal commitment to Title IX and women's opportunities. The fact is that, unfortunately, the report in the Daily was incomplete and a bit misleading. As president, I take gender equality in athletics and across the university extremely seriously. And over the decades, Title IX has been a long-term commitment for this university. We monitor and evaluate it regularly through our Title IX coordinator and through our Faculty Advisory Committee on Athletics Subcommittee on Equity and Diversity. These measures have been in place for many years. And long before any news story, we were in the process of selecting an external expert to complete a periodic Title IX review. Athletic Director Teague shares my passion for women's athletics and looks forward to the outcome of this report. And I'm confident that if the review doesn't affirm our longstanding commitment, which I will be astonished if it does not, we will move forward as we need to address any problems. Let me turn to our Twin Cities campus policy around smoking. Last week, the University Senate passed a resolution supporting a smoking ban, with few exceptions, on campus. When this issue first crossed my desk soon after I arrived, I felt that a lack of consensus in the campus community was holding up our progress in that area, and I asked our colleagues to reinvigorate their discussions around that issue. With the Senate's action, consensus has now been reached, overwhelmingly reached. The data has been clear for decades. Illness related to smoking are the leading cause of avoidable mortality in the United States. And Minnesota, as a state, has been among the most progressive when it comes to protecting the public health. Our work at the university has been central to that. A smoke-free campus has become an exception among peer institutions has become an expectation among peer institutions rather than an innovation. Our Duluth and Crookston campuses are already smoke-free. 49 Minnesota colleges and universities have tobacco or smoke-free policies. Nationwide, 1,159 colleges and universities are smoke-free, and 783 are 100% tobacco-free. I think it's about time for us to do that. We'll work together to develop an implementation plan, and our colleagues at Boynton Health have begun already on a framework for making this happen. It will take several months, perhaps a full year, to educate the community about the change and to redouble our cessation efforts. Smoking is an addiction. And as the Star Tribune reported, a sophomore architecture student was quoted as saying, "If I can't smoke in school, if I can't smoke here, here, or here, I might as well just give it up." That's our goal. Once an implementation plan is met with campus-wide consensus, I will be prepared to enact a smoke-free and, depending on the state of the consensus, perhaps a tobacco-free policy. This leads me to a very significant development that we'll be discussing more fully in a few minutes and for which I will be seeking your approval, and that is our relationship with Fairview Health Services. From the day I arrived on campus now nearly 2 years ago, I emphasized among my priorities operational excellence and a rejuvenation of the Academic Health Center and especially the medical school. What you will be seeing later today is a new agreement that I believe will advance those efforts. You should also know that last week, University and Fairview leaders held a full-day groundbreaking retreat. The State Department might call the meetings we had frank and candid. I would add incredibly productive and firmly setting a new course. I'm looking forward to a new era of partnership between the University of Minnesota physicians, and Fairview. Joining us later today will be Chuck Moody, Interim CEO and Chair of the Board of Fairview, and Carolyn Wilson, President of UMMC. They've been extraordinarily good partners as we've worked to reset our relationship and finalize the integrated structure agreements you will see. With that, Madam Chair, I conclude my report, and as always, thank you and this board for your deep engagement, your commitment to this university, your engagement with our community, and for your support and guidance. Thank you.
Thank you, President Kaler. We can see that you've been highly, highly engaged also. Now I would like to begin my report, and bear with me, it's a little longer than usual because some of you have been very busy, and I like to report what you're doing. But first I want to begin my report by welcoming our two new regents. We want to welcome them to the board, Peggy Lucas, who is from Congressional District 5, and Abdul Omari, filling one of the at-large seats. You may recognize Regent Omari as he previously served as a student representative to the Board of Regents. They have had a whirlwind of orientation meetings the past few weeks, and I believe are getting acclimated to the board quite nicely. We are so happy they are here and look forward to working together in fulfilling the mission of the university. Welcome, Peggy and Omari. With the approaching end of the academic year, students are busy taking final exams and many are preparing for commencements. Regents are participating in 29 commencements across all 5 campuses. This is a monumental event in a student's life, and we are all honored to take part in the ceremonies. There have been several university events with Regent participation that I want to note. Regent McMillan attended a copper-nickel mining panel discussion at UMD on April 9th and was on hand in Mountain Iron when the university released results of the taconite worker health study on mesothelioma. Regents Devine, Omari, and I traveled to Crookston campus on April 17th for an extensive campus tour and public forum with faculty, staff, students, and community members. It was a day full of discovery that we enjoyed greatly. Regents Allen, Beeson, and Broad joined us in Crookston on April 18th for the grand opening of Heritage Hall, the University of Minnesota Crookston's newest residence hall, followed by the inauguration ceremony of Chancellor Fred Wood. The Crookston campus and community is cohesive, dedicated, and clearly thrilled to have Chancellor Wood at the helm. On April 24th, I attended an event hosted by the College of Education and Human Development focused on closing the achievement gap in Minnesota. Panelists discussed issues at the local and state level. It was engaging and thought-provoking. Later in the day, on April 24th, Regent Devine spoke at the National Scholarship Nominee and Recipients Reception, honoring 53 University of Minnesota students who were either nominated for or won prestigious national awards. It was a proud moment for the students, their families, their professors, and the entire university community. On that same date, Regent McMillan attended an awards banquet at the Labovitz School of Business at UMD. And on April 25th, Regent Devine participated in the Outstanding Achievement Award ceremony for Professor Yanis Zividis from the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering. Regents have also participated in community events recently. On March 20th, Regent Allen spoke at the Moorhead Kiwanis Club. On April 9th, Regent Johnson spoke at the Wilmer Kiwanis Club. And on April 10th, Regent Allen spoke to a group of private college chief financial officers at an event in St. Paul. Phew. The Board of Regents is establishing a committee for the purpose of evaluating the performance of President Eric Kaler. The committee is made up of Regent Larson, Regent McMillan, and I. The work of the committee is expected to take place over several days. The committee's meetings, therefore, will be recessed and continued until the committee has completed its work. At present, the schedule of the committee is expected to be May 10th at 2 p.m., May 28th at 1 p.m., and June 12th at 6:30 p.m. At the conclusion of the committee's work, the meeting will be adjourned. The committee will adjourn the meeting in open session so that the public is aware when the meeting is concluded. At the conclusion of its work, the committee will report to the board at the board's next meeting, which will be June 14th, 2013. At that time, the committee will summarize its conclusions regarding the performance evaluation. I would also like to announce the establishment of the Board of Regents Nominating Committee. Members include Regent Allen, Chair, Regent Frobenius, and Regent Omari. The committee is charged with recommending a slate of candidates to serve as Board Chair, Vice Chair, Secretary, and Treasurer. A member of the committee will contact each regent in May to solicit thoughts. The committee will present its recommendation at the Board's annual meeting on Friday, June 14th. Later today, several regents will be touring the Recreation and Wellness Center expansion to learn more about how it will support student success. I'm very much looking forward to that. The next meeting of the Board of Regents is June 5th, 2013, when we will review President Kaler's recommended fiscal year 2014 operating budget and hear comments from the university community. That concludes my report. And thank you to all the regents who have been so busy doing all sorts of really wonderful things. Now I'd like to file and receive reports and then ask for a motion for the consent report. Is there a motion to approve that?
So moved. Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion about the consent report? If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. And now I would like to invite Cody Mickle forward to present the report of the student representatives. Cody, please come to the table.
Good morning, Chair Cohen and Regents. Thank you for having us today. And I would like to apologize for some of the student absences this morning. As President Kaler mentioned, this is a particularly busy time of year for us. And I also wanted to say thank you for how warm and welcoming and friendly you all have been to work with this past year. It's evident to me in the recruitment for finding student representatives for the coming year. I emphatically stated to them that this is a great experience and that there aren't really closed-door conversations, and that students and their perspective is really integrated into the entirety of the policy and conversation discussion process. So thank you for that. I would also like to thank the students who served with me this past year, and in particular Kyle Kroll, Megan Mason, and Molly Tom Ford from Duluth for their extremely hard work on the reports, and so thank you to my colleagues. And then also to the board staff, and in particular Ken Savory for his support for the coming year. It's tremendous help. With that, our report was published publicly last week, and so I'll just hit on some of the highlights here today. The first item of our report was the exploration of a tobacco-free Twin Cities campus, and that is a policy that I, for one, am extremely excited about, caring a lot about the health of our campus community, and we view it as really an extension of a policy that the Board of Regents enacted in 1993 to prevent smoking in indoor spaces on the university. And the spirit of that policy was also the health and safety of our campus community, including students, faculty, staff, and visitors. And as I said, we consider this to be an extension of that policy. The United States Department of Health and Human Services recognizes that there is no safe level of exposure, there's no safe level of tobacco use, and that includes secondhand smoke, which universities, students on campus here report that is the number one, when they're asked to think about where they're exposed to secondhand smoke, walking across campus behind a smoker is the first thing that comes to mind. And we want to do anything that we can to try to mitigate that exposure. And I think that a policy such as this can be very effective in that. We also want to join a lot of our Big Ten peers who are a step ahead of us in this policy. President Kaler also mentioned this morning there are a lot of other institutions across the nation who are embracing this type of policy, and I just wanted to point out former institution of our Provost Hanson, Indiana, is included Ohio State, Illinois, Iowa, Michigan, the entire University of California system, and the University of Texas at Austin. Some of our contemporaries, some of our peers that we like to benchmark against are a step ahead of us in this regard. And in addition, much of the research, it's indisputable, but much of the research regarding the health risks of tobacco use has been conducted on our very own campus. And I think in order for us to honor some of that research, that this is a good policy to implement. Also, there are some potential health care cost savings involved with a cessation-focused implementation policy, and that's something that the student governance on campus looks very much forward to, participating in the implementation process and doing whatever we can to help make this a seamless transition and something that's not, I think some people in their mind think of police officers standing on the corner and handing out tickets for people that they see smoking, and that's not at all what we envision for an implementation process, and we're excited to take a look and do what we can. The next section of the report was instructor evaluations, and I actually just wrapped up my last class of the semester last night, so I just filled one out last night at 7:20 p.m., so it's fresh on my mind. So at the end of every course on the Twin Cities campus, and I have been here since 2002, I can't speak for the coordinate campuses, but I know that I have filled one of these out after every class, and the purpose of the student rating of teacher form is to improve teaching, inform the review process, and help students potentially decide on what courses might be good for them to take. And currently, I think we could improve on the third goal of instructor evaluations. The reviews of teachers aren't really helping students choose what courses might be best for them to take. And that is because it is currently an opt-in process that only 12% of instructors participate in. So 12% of the courses have these student ratings of teachers available. And then secondly, to find the report through the Office of Measurement Services, we're thankful that they pull everything together, but if you begin to type in some search terms on the One Stop website, it's very difficult to try to find where the student rating of teacher reporting happens. Even for myself, I've been involved in this campus for quite a long time. It's difficult to come up with the correct vocabulary or find the correct office to know where to find these. And so we would like to make gains in both of those areas. We would like more faculty or more instructors to opt into this process, to maybe take a look at the top 4 questions on those review of teachers. Maybe that's not private data, and if it's not, maybe that could be an opt-out process. We're not sure on what the solution would be, but we would like more instructors to participate in releasing that information, and then we would also like to make some improvements on the accessibility of that information, possibly integrating that into the one-stop course registration process. We think might be a fantastic idea, and we understand there's an enterprise upgrade taking place for our institutional software, so maybe there's a great opportunity for that. And then finally, the last topic was open educational resources. Textbooks represent one of the fastest growing costs in higher education, and for undergraduates and a lot of introductory courses, those costs can add up quickly. And open textbooks, open educational resources are an attempt to mitigate those costs. And the U of M is actually uniquely positioned to do well at this, because we have an open textbook catalog that has approaching 100 textbooks for introductory courses, and it may not sound like a lot, but if there are hundreds or thousands of students taking these sections of these courses and it's $50 savings per student, it really can be significant. We would like to emphasize that open resources are not necessarily low quality, and they are lower cost. They can be printed much more economically. And so we would like to take a closer look at open educational resources and encourage faculty to take a look at those resources, to be aware that they're available, and to encourage them to use them if it's a good fit for their course, not to force them, but to ask them to take a look at it. And I would like to end. Thank you again. It has been a wonderful experience this year to work with you all, and with that I will stand for some questions.
Thank you very much, Representative Mickle. We've appreciated the thoughtfulness of your reports and the importance of the three issues that you brought up. Are there questions or comments from the regents? Regent Beeson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you. Two quick points. One is for next year's work plan. I don't know exactly how that gets developed, but I'd like to have you think about working on the Boynton Health Care Center, some of the issues, and students would have particular knowledge about that. Second point is on the issue of ranking faculty is why don't you let the free market social media sort of manage this? And I know there's this rate the professor, but it seems to me you shouldn't wait for, us to sort of sort out the privacy issues as today's world, and be interested in Regent Omari's thought about, I know there's extreme opinions posted on those things probably, but it is a free country, and we've got this media, social media that's there to facilitate that discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Mickle, do you have a comment?
Chair Cohen, Representative Regent Beeson, thank you for your comments. We do absolutely look forward to maybe having a role in shaping some of the agendas for the coming year to take a look at what we've brought up in our reports in the fall report and the spring report. We've seen a lot of motion on the fall report, so we appreciate that. That's one of the reasons why we feel confident that we're not just the token student perspective, that you actually care about what we think. So thank you for that. We look forward to working with the board staff and looking at the agendas. And then also, on your second point, I think that it might, I don't know for sure, but it might be in the interest of the institution to get out in front of the free market and what might evolve in the free market if it were left in the hands of students to talk to. For example, the ratemyprofessor.com might not be the best resource for students. It might not be a resource that the institution wants students to go to get that kind of information. As you said, the anonymity of the web takes a lot of filters away, and so might not want to do that.
President Kaler and then Regent Allen.
Thank you, Chair Cohen. I'll just touch briefly on all three of these things, and I do thank you for your report. You are a wonderful group to work with, and you bring a lot to the board. I appreciate it. So on smoking, I talked about smoking in my report, and we're absolutely on the same page with that. I share your desire to not have the police or with the president standing on corners handing out tickets. And one reason that I pushed back when I first arrived here was that there wasn't what I thought was a broad enough consensus. There were a lot of dissenting voices about this, and I think this past year of conversation has really gotten people on board, and we do have the momentum to do this, and so we'll look forward to getting it done. Both of my parents died of cancer related to smoking, so you don't really have to sell me on the idea of reducing smoking. The instructor evaluation one is an interesting problem. I mean, I didn't know they were hard to find on our website, and as soon as I can talk to Vice President Studham, who's in the back there somewhere, we'll make sure they're easy to get to. There are some significant privacy issues, and we've looked at this in some detail, and the lawyers tell us that the instructor evaluations per se are the instructor's private property. I don't know completely that I buy that, but that's what we're told, and we'll take another run at that. It also seems to me we probably can devise some way to have some course and class content related questions that aren't teacher specific, and that those could be public in the teacher per se evaluations. If they have to be private, they could stay private. I agree with you that the social media does remove some filters, as you say. That's a good way to put it, and I'm not sure how we can construct something that meets the law and provides all the data that you'd like to have. But I certainly appreciate the need and the desire to have that info. And finally, the open textbook catalog. I'm a huge fan of this, and we need to find a way to reduce the cost of going to college. And a big part of that cost is some really just breathtakingly priced textbooks. The counterside to that, of course, is the quality of what's there and the alignment of what's in an open source textbook with what the faculty member needs. And part of the reason you pay tuition is to get the expertise of the faculty member around shaping that information. So it's a fine balance. I think it'll tip as more open source information becomes available, and I'm committed to helping that happen. We have some great folks in our libraries who can evaluate and help make that information around what's available more easily available to the instructor so that he or she can make a wise choice. So I think we're aligned on all three of these things, and I'll end where I started by thanking you and your colleagues for your contributions.
Regent Allen.
Cody, I just wanted to say thank you, as many have, for the formal reports that you folks have given us over the years. You really do keep us well informed about things we need to pay attention to. But I also wanted to add just another perspective to that. I hope you realize how much it means to us to just have a group of young students around all the time when we're here for formal meetings. You keep us informed and sensitive, I think, to the fact that we need to try to think like students in some ways. We're a little too old to be doing that naturally, but you help us do that. And so we thank you for that. You contribute a lot just by being here, and keep that in mind, too. Thank you very much for all your good work to all of you.
Well said. Thank you so much to all the student representatives. All right. Thanks much for your report. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, we're on to the next item here, which is the resolution related to the new integrated structure for patient care services. And I would like to invite President Kaler to open the discussion while the other presenters are making their way to the table. I see several coming now, so glad to have you.
Madam Chair, members of the board, I'm extremely pleased to bring forward for your approval a resolution related to the new integrated structure for patient care services. I'll turn our full presentation over to our Vice President for Health Sciences and Medical School Dean, Dr. Aaron Friedman, and Dr. Bobby Daniels, the CEO of University of Minnesota Physicians. And joining them at the table are Chuck Moody, the interim CEO and Chair of the Board of Fairview, and Carolyn Wilson, President of UMMC, to answer questions as they may arise. As I said in my report to you earlier today, the advancement and reputation of our AHC, our medical school, and our medical school faculty is a priority of mine. Minnesota's healthcare future is inextricably linked to the University of Minnesota. We're the state's largest and most important institution for health education and health care, and it's exciting to be able to embark on this next chapter. I think all three of our parties are in agreement about the need to renew our commitment to a top-tier medical health system, and I believe we're all aligned with how to make these next steps. So I'm happy to present to you Dr. Friedman and Dr. Daniels. I thank you for your leadership in this important work and look forward to your presentation.
Please, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Cohen, Regents, President Kaler. Bobby Daniels and I will share this, but I'm pleased to first thank Dr. Daniels, who's worked doggedly on this, and also with us here today, as the President has pointed out, are Chuck Moody and Carolyn Wilson. The President has also expressed his thanks to both Chuck and Carolyn, but I think Bobby and I want to do the same thing. We've been working for about 18 months on this project and feel that we've actually come to a really good resolution. So thanks again to them as well.
Yes, welcome, and thank you very much for joining Dr. Friedman and Dr. Daniels. We're glad that you're here.
I'm going to start and then turn this over to Bobby Daniels as we get into the integrated structure itself. But let me start by saying, and you should have these in front of you, so while they're working on this, we'll make our way through. I think a little bit of backdrop may be helpful, and the second and third slides actually do that, and they point out that the University, UMP, and Fairview have had a relationship which really began in earnest in 1997 when affiliation agreements were signed between the university and Fairview. And we share a lot of common commitment: clinical excellence, research, education, Also, we know that healthcare is changing, and the affiliation agreement, even though it's only, if you want to say that, 16 years old, healthcare has changed dramatically in that period of time, and part of why we've done this is to be able to respond. And also, we know that integration, being able to care for patients, being able to involve education and research in a much more seamless way, is also necessary to be effective now and in the future. That's something we realize. It's also something the market knows, and we believe we're actually very well positioned to not only parlay what we've done in the past, but to be even more effective in the future. We are one of the nation's most comprehensive academic health centers. We have a track record of innovation, especially in translational medicine. We have a commitment to excellence, which we share, and we have a legacy and a history of providing excellent care and meeting community needs. So this relationship, we think, positions us to continue to grow all those aspects of our relationship together. It's a new structure. It's designed to better govern, manage, and operate our academic clinical enterprise. So, this new integrated clinical model, it's a co-management structure, has co-leadership. The president of UMMC today is Carolyn Wilson. The CEO of Physicians today is Bobby Daniels. We anticipate and intend to develop a new board which would govern this integrated structure. And by the way, we know that integrated structure is not a name that is going to last. But it's served us well up until now, and I'm sure we'll be talking to you and others about a new name in the near future. This arrangement enhances financing of the university's academic mission, and it's on the foundation of our 1997 affiliation agreement, which remains unchanged. The vision: to be a national leader in outcomes, research, and education, and to be ranked in the top 10% of academic medical centers in the country. How do we do that? We improve our patient care. We do more than we're even doing now, providing a seamless experience and developing care models within our institution, but also in keeping with where healthcare is going. We enhance education. We also do that not only by some increase in funding, but also by increasing the on-site training opportunities for not only our medical students, but for our academic health center at large. And we support healthcare research. We increase our focus on trials and other research that we can do in the clinical setting. And it's our responsibility, along with other things that are at the university today, such as our Clinical Translational Science Institute, we speed the movement of research from the bench to the bedside. So I think I'll turn this over to Bobby, and she'll discuss the integrated structure in a bit more detail. Bobby?
Thank you, Dr. Friedman. What we're proposing today is a limited liability company owned jointly by University of Minnesota Physicians and Fairview. We're also proposing a new board which would be appointed by the university and UMP together with Fairview and would be chaired by the dean of the medical school. The management structure, as Dr. Friedman mentioned, would be co-led, and we're also proposing a 5-year agreement with an automatic renewal unless one party chooses to not renew. As has been mentioned, this is a shared governance, shared management model. There will be a single strategic, operational, and management model. But this is not a structural change. It really represents a functional change of the two organizations with consolidation of clinical and administrative services. It's not a merger, it's not an acquisition, and it's not a takeover. The underlying agreements between the university, Fairview, and UMP continue, and those are shown on the next slide and represent a rather complicated triangle of agreements. But it's important that because these relationships have been in place, some of them for as long as 16 years, that we build on that very strong foundation. The scope of the integrated structure includes the University of Minnesota Medical Center and the Amplatz Children's Hospital, the UMP outpatient clinics, and all services that touch any part of Fairview. In addition, the university-branded service lines within Fairview, those being cardiology, oncology, mother and children's services, and the UMP specialty care services at the Fairview Maple Grove Ambulatory Care Center. We also envision that the future proposed ambulatory care center will fall under this umbrella. This is a very large organization. We envision at this point over 700,000 clinic visits, 35,000 hospital admissions, a large number of staff and physicians, and $1.9 billion in annual revenues. The next slide demonstrates an organizational structure, and this just shows in graphic form what I've already reviewed. The Board of Directors is envisioned to be 12 members, again chaired by the Dean of the Medical School. Will also include the CEO of Fairview, and 4 members appointed by the university and UMP, as well as 4 members appointed by Fairview. The co-leaders of the integrated structure will be non-voting members. The Dean continues to retain the authority that's been granted in the previous agreements and will include his approval for any action or material impact on academic programs. We envision a new board being in place by the end of 2013, and prior to that, an interim board, which we're calling the Transition Board, will continue. That's the CEO of Fairview, the Dean of the Medical School, the President of UMMC, and the CEO of UMP. In addition, the current boards of UMMC and the Amplatz Children's Hospital will be disbanded. We also envision a single strategic plan for the integrated structure enterprise, a single management, operational, and financial model, integration of operating and our capital budgets, virtually integrated profit and loss statements. However, it's important to remember that the 3 organizations remain independent as separate legal entities with separate balance sheets. I've mentioned the management structure, and again, we're talking about co-management, shared management with specific responsibilities to each of the co-leaders. We will make, as we go forward, decisions about how we relate to the parents in terms of the parents supplying various support services based on quality, service, and cost.
I think it comes back to me now, so I'll pick it up from there. As we mentioned earlier, there will be increased academic support. This slide describes that, and also should point out that that academic support will be budgeted, but there's an opportunity to generate even additional academic support based on how well the clinical enterprise does, and any addition, any change over what is the net income target for this entire integrated structure would be shared between Fairview system, the integrated structure, and the medical school. We will be receiving our academic support in quarterly payments, and the 4th payment is the one at risk, so to speak, in case net income targets are not met. So far, we actually, for this year, for example, are probably ahead of where we expected to be. An example of what we can do even when we're working together without the integrated structure, we anticipate to do even better with it. Next slide. The university retains reserved powers that are listed here, approval of new UMP sites and ventures, and so forth. I think it's important to recognize these are, in fact, reserved powers that exist with the university today. Also, the Regents approve the IS board members upon recommendation from UMP, the dean, and the president. The medical school dean retains approval for IS action that has a material impact on academic programs. I've been asked about this a couple of times, so let me just take a minute to explain. An example of that might be the fact that we have a whole series of residency programs, many of which are inside the Fairview system. It would be particularly significant if a decision was made to either close a program which could have an impact on one of our residency programs. So the dean has to retain that kind of approval. UMP physicians in Fairview also retain certain reserve powers, approval of the IS budget, the addition of new members, any call on capital, and what we've stated is activities that could put the IS in conflict with either UMP or Fairview. So what's before you today is a resolution, and I think we could actually just go to the last slide, because this is the resolution, authorizing the President to execute a proposed master agreement and academic support agreement for the integrated structure. These agreements are based on the principles and expectations detailed in the letter of intent authorized by the Board in April of 2012 and executed in May of 2012. And I should point out that these agreements were approved by UMP Physicians Board and the Fairview Health Services Board in April of this year. So with that, we'll stop and prepare to take questions that you may have.
Thank you, Dr. Friedman, Dr. Daniels. Now, are there questions questions or comments from the board members? Regent Frobenius.
I want to make some comments at a little later point in the discussion. The presentation caused a question to pop up in my head that I haven't thought about before. And I think you all have heard some of my questions much too much along the way. With 80% of UMP now moving, really, finances moving into the integrated structure, UMP makes a sizable contribution annually to the medical school, and that number exceeds the targeted number that's in this document. Does that continue separate from the $7 to $10 million that's contemplated in this element?
Yes. Chair Cohn, President Kaler, Regent Frobenius, and Regents, yes, it is our intent to continue those contributions. That $40 million encompasses both a dean's tax, which will continue, as well as transfers that chairs decide to make to support the academic programs in their departments. So yes, we will continue to do that, and we anticipate doing it at that level.
Thank you.
Okay, Regent Beeson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, presenters, and all the work that all of you have done in connection with this. This is obviously an operations-focused proposal with an accompanied set of documents. I would hope that as much time can be spent by all the parties on the more strategic issues going forward, because without the planning that goes on to deal with the marketplace on the growth issues, the top line issues, all the progress we make on the operational side will be for naught. So I know that has started, and I think that's at several layers: the dean, the president, the CEO, partners, the co-presidents, where hopefully they'll be talking every day about growth and about building the business, and not just about making the existing operation more efficient, is where really this has to go on a sort of a parallel path. Thank you.
Dr. Friedman, do you want to respond?
Thank you, Chair Cohen and Regent Beeson. In fact, one of the things that we didn't put in the slide but really do need to point out is that part of the impetus for this is the ability to work more seamlessly together. And that also means actually saving time in order to be able to do things that we do today in a much more complicated way. I think all of us recognize that the part of that time savings is to do exactly what you're talking about. And rather than being mired, if you will, in some of the operational details, which just took time, we have the opportunity to use that in a much more strategic way.
Thank you. Regent Allen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Aaron covered partly what I was going to say. I see this as a real step forward in giving us a more nimble organization. You know, the healthcare field is a unmapped forest these days that seems to grow more dense by the day. And whatever it turns out to be, we need to be in a more nimble position to find our way through it with all the competition. And it seems to me this is a major step forward in creating that nimbleness, and indeed they will have to spend a lot of time on the strategic issues, as Regent Beeson mentioned. So I have quite a good idea of all the work that's gone into this, and I just want to say thank you to all of you for the spirit and the detail with which you've approached it.
Regent Frobenius.
Well, I want to add some comments, and I guess I have a particular perspective of this. It's made this an interesting project to follow for the number of years, having spent 7 years of my life as a co-president of a healthcare system that was going through hospital and physician integration, obviously in a much smaller and a less complex environment than this one. But I just want to reinforce several things that have been said and add a couple thoughts of my own. But major changes are occurring in healthcare, and have occurred and will continue to occur at an escalating pace, both in the delivery and the financing of care. These changes, in my mind, absolutely require different forms of organization to gain significant improvements in the quality and cost and qualities. These changes also, absent any other actions, are a particular challenge to financing medical education. And that becomes a critical issue for our responsibilities as the university to the state of Minnesota. It's clear around the country that the most successful participants in this change are those that can effectively integrate medical and other practitioners with the organizational elements in the hospitals for the delivery of care. And it's absolutely amazing as you begin to see some of the things that can occur once you get everybody on the same, singing on the same hymnal and on the same page. This consolidation is occurring rapidly across the country. This is an important first step that requires both parties to be responsibly involved and committed. We as a university can not only be concerned about getting more resources for our medical education activity, but utilizing our resources and our strength to help effectively involve the changes in the delivery system of care. Fairview can and will be able to make use of some of the strengths of the U for the operation of the university hospital and its other related services. Both sides are approaching this, in my opinion, with the responsibility for both the give and take of this relationship, and there is a lot of give and take. There's a trite phrase used a lot to talk about the fact the devil is always in the detail, and the devil is in the detail of this arrangement, and the key to this will be execution. And so it'll take some time for this to evolve. There's not a lot of time available, but it will be critical as to how well all parties can execute this process as we go forward. Although integrated structures are clearly seen as the best approach, not all are successful, and some fail. And I think what these folks have done during this extended period of time of organization and discussion is to search for the best process that significantly improves the current situation over what we have and provides a pathway to some further evolution in the structure that we're choosing. So I urge my colleagues to continue to support this resolution today. Thank you.
Thank you, Regent Frobenius. Regent Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and all of you who have worked very, very hard on this to bring this before us today. I would suggest to my Regent colleagues, as well as to the President, this is one of the most major decisions this board will make and you will make as we move forward in the healthcare initiative for the University of Minnesota. Just a couple of thoughts. When I hear and read about co-management, co-leadership, maybe it's my military background or observation in life, but I always believe it always comes down, you have a commander, you have a president, you have a boss, you have a CEO. Somebody ultimately has to make the decision. Now, we have the luxury of you folks in the present positions getting along. You've demonstrated that. One day, you are going to move on to whatever, and new folks will take over. And I'm always somewhat concerned about this idea of co-leadership, because if two individuals are going to manage this system, and for whatever reason you decide you do not appreciate, like, whatever, each other, this integrated system that's before us today could potentially have some problems. More energy is spent on two folks getting along about decision-making. So maybe you could shed some light on this, and that begs another question. Does this resolution for the future offer that there could be future consolidations? And maybe you've talked about that and say, you know, don't talk to us about it at this point in time. Maybe that's the next step. And I admit, I'm not at the doctor level that John Fabinius is in this. I'm kind of at the elementary level, and I admit that. And then finally, what does this mean for the healthcare systems throughout Minnesota? You know, we talk about it here, you know, in Minneapolis and greater Minneapolis, St. Paul area, very important. But there's a lot of healthcare systems throughout the state, too, that this could impact. So, Madam Chair, that's my kind of comments, questions, and maybe I need some enlightenment. Thank you.
Sounds as though you have a lot of questions packed into that. So which one of you would like to begin? Dr. Friedman.
Thank you, Chair Cohen and Regent Johnson. Let me take them in reverse order. We have an important role to play with many, if not all, of the healthcare systems in the state of Minnesota. And as you know, a lot of our students are all over the state, and we are responsible, if you will, in some fashion or another, for a large percentage of the healthcare workforce in the state. I think, if anything, our ability to act, as Regent Allen has pointed out, more nimbly and more effectively, if anything, actually helps the other programs in the state of Minnesota from a healthcare delivery perspective, as well as from the perspective of education and even research in the state. Your second point was well, let me get to the first one, which is, I think, the key one, if it's okay with you. Your second point was, does this do something, will there be later consolidation or something like that? The affiliation agreement from the get-go did anticipate our evolution. And I think we've always considered this to be part of that anticipation, which is to say we expect further evolution to occur. We know it's going to occur, and especially in a changing environment. So we don't believe that anything that we're doing today limits our ability to evolve even more in the future. Now, with respect to co-management, I think it's important to recognize that today, the president of UMMC and the CEO of UMP operate separate organizations. And to the extent that when we're trying to improve the patient experience, improve the patient outcomes, be more effective as educators and researchers, it becomes important for those organizations to work more closely. So maintaining that separateness is what we're doing with respect to things like the budgets of the two separate organizations. There will be a virtual budget, but we recognize these are two separate organizations. But in effect, what we've said is it's even more important, and we're actually going to incentivize that activity to a greater extent than we do today by creating this kind of structure. So I would argue, in fact, that sending the message that we intend to work more closely together and making the responsible leadership responsible in a co-leadership fashion is actually a really good step. Yes. Go ahead, Chair.
Yes. Mr. Moody.
Thank you, Chair Cohen and Regent Johnson. I think the other point that comes in that's relevant to that piece is the fact that there is a governing board of those co-managers. And so the idea of those co-managers, when there is debate or when there is discussion that may not be totally aligned, that governing board is actually the one responsible for making that decision in that respect. So I think there is a structural element that comes into play. But I think, as you alluded to, the key is the relationship of the two co-managers and the relationship that's cultivated. But so I think there are ways around that in that perspective. I would also just reinforce, since I got the mic, so I'll just take a quick minute, and that is, I do think that this is an incredibly important time, at a time when there is great evolution within the world of healthcare, that we find better models and that we find better ways to execute ourselves. And I think that this is a great step of integrating organizations with that common theme of how is it that we elevate ourselves, and more importantly, elevate the educational and research piece in addition to the clinical piece, because all of those phases have to evolve. And it's not just the marketplace, it's the educational piece and the research piece as well that has to evolve. And so I think connecting them and ultimately bringing those parties together will be much more impactful to the state as well as to the university and to the organizations here.
Thank you. Regent Frobenius has a comment about your question. Regent Johnson.
I just wanted to comment on Regent Johnson's question. There is a particular appointment in this process that is critical. The co-presidents have to find a good working relationship. The referee and leader of that process becomes the board chair of that board. And in fact, we have a unique opportunity here. We're in this process of selecting that individual who will be the dean, serve as the dean of the medical school in that role as a chair. To me, that's one of the most significant commitments to the academic portion of this mission that's made in this structure. And the fact that we have the opportunity to select that dean at this point in time gives us an opportunity to pick somebody who has some particular skills in that referee leadership role. And I just can't stress the importance of that individual board chair in making this thing kind of work smoothly.
Thank you. Regent Devine.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an important day that we've got that we're moving forward with. We're totally reinvigorating our relationship, and it's a very symbolic signaling to a number of people across the state and our legislature, people within the university community, and obviously the people within Fairview and UMP. And on the onset of this, there's been obviously much that has already been said about thanking the various people, but I want to pay a particular note to a couple things here relative to that. When President Kaler came aboard, you know, within the first month or two of his being here, one of the first projects that he tackled in earnest was the whole situation of south of Washington in terms of what are we going to do with the whole academic health issues and all of what goes on with medical education here in Minnesota. And he's obviously devoted a significant part of his presidency thus far to the actions and activities. And I think that needs to be noted here because it has been taken in earnest far before a lot of the discussions that have taken place just most recently in terms of what we needed to do to set direction here at the board level and with his presidency. The other thing, obviously, that I would like to obviously recognize is the individual efforts that all of you have made individually in terms of contributing to the outcome that we have here today. We had a special committee of the board, which many of you are aware that Clyde, John, and Linda have been involved with and have been involved in the great detail on behalf of the Board of Regents within the special committee. Many hours, many meetings, many conversations have taken place and trying to keep us up on all the various details, which obviously there's significant levels of detail that the rest of us as board members have not been in front of, but certainly we appreciate the efforts that they've made here going on. And also I want to just mention a couple of other things. You know, we're at a transformational point in healthcare here, not only in Minnesota, but in the country. And I think that the collaboration that's been developed here in terms of how we're going to be moving forward is really an important step. And I think it's going to continue to be a model that we're going to be facing all the way across America in terms of public-private. All sorts of different relationships are going to be formulated on a whole different level than what they have been in the past. And so the challenge that I make to all of you sitting here that are involved with the implementation of what we have to go forward is to really take advantage of the opportunities. Chuck, you mentioned it in part, and I think that when we look at the relationships, not only of what we've got and what we're talking about here today, but the relationships of Mayo Clinic, we look at the partnering of what we've got with our medical industry here within Minnesota, and certainly the outreach of other delivery systems across Minnesota, and then most notably our business community and importantly our legislature. I think we've seen certainly with some of the aspects of the legislation that have been put forth this session, we need to think in totally different creative terms of how we're going to go about staying a leader as a state here in Minnesota. And I think the challenge is beyond just this. Today is the tipping point of a decision that affects many, many, many other decisions that we're going to be faced with here over the next few years, and millions of dollars of construction in public investment, state investment, university investment. And so the challenge to keep all venues open and available, I challenge us to do that. Thank you.
Okay. Regent McMillan.
Thank you, Chair Cohen, and I too am impressed by a lot of what I see here, but more than anything, the business model innovation that's coming here is really encouraging. I think Regent Allen called it healthcare a dark and uncharted forest or something like that. So the right business model is something I don't know that any of us have figured out yet, but you're willing to work together to try and find that. So I asked this question with no sense of the end in mind, but exit strategies are always important. And as we get, here's the question, is there any way this ends before 5 years? So that would be the first. And then is it a renewal for another 5 years? It looks like it's set up to evergreen. And if it isn't going to renew, how quickly does either party have to tell the other? Again, I don't anticipate exiting, but it's always important to think about whether it's military or business. There's importance of doing that. So are those three questions clear?
Yeah, there are a variety of exit strategies that have indeed been outlined. And so in the fourth year, there's the opportunity to jointly make a decision or even unilaterally make a decision under a variety of conditions. We would envision that if all goes well and we haven't come up with a better model, that there would be not just an evergreen, but an assent to move forward into that second 5-year period. So I think there are those escape clauses, if you will, in the document. There's nothing that we envision, though, happening in the first couple of years. So we've intentionally committed to giving the integrated structure long enough of a period of time to work so that we're not immediately looking at an opt-out really early in the course of the arrangement.
Thank you.
Regent Allen.
Following up on that question, but on the positive side of it, would I be right in hoping that maybe after the first couple of years you mentioned, Bobby, we might see issues coming back here where you have found even better ways of doing things and we would need to act and approve those too? I mean, you've got a sense of how well you're working together. Based on that, is it your assumption that we will find even better ways to do it?
Chair Cohen, Regent Allen, that's absolutely what we hope. We hope that this is the beginning of a new era in the relationship. And I think it's important to note that this is built on 17 years of progress. And in particular, there's been an acceleration over the last few years in a variety of ways. So you're right on, and that's what the intent is.
And I guess my key point was that we wouldn't wait 5 years to see those. We probably would expect to see them coming maybe in the third, fourth year.
Absolutely.
Okay. Regent Frobenius, and then I'm going to ask for a motion.
I just think it's important in response to Regent McMillan's comment also to say that there's another piece of glue that's part of this transaction we discussed in our Finance Committee. And the fact is the University of Minnesota is going to build a new clinic building on this campus. And we're going to lease that building to two of the organizations that are represented at the table, and it's not going to be a 5-year lease. It's going to be more like a 30-year lease tied to the length of term of the financing of the building. And so it is not just you go down the road for 5 years and say, this isn't working well, we don't want to renew. We're going to have to sort out that particular element of the transaction. And that would be a significant transaction that part of the transaction to unwind. So I think, to me, that's just an additional part of the glue.
Okay, thank you. I'd invite you, Ms. Wilson. You're the only one at the table who hasn't had a chance to speak. If you would like to say something, don't feel you have to, but if you would like to, we certainly would like to hear what you have to say.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Regents. It's my pleasure, actually, to be part of this team, and I'd like to say thank you to all of you for your support, and we do look forward to bringing more innovative solutions and faster outcomes.
All right, thank you. All right, now is there a motion?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we vote on this item. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes, and I, too, want to say thank you to the parties involved. You've all worked extremely hard, we know, to come to this point, and I've heard a couple things about this is a new structure. I've heard about evolution, and that were our hopes that it will be the starting point for lots of improvement, and that we hope that the spirit of cooperation continues. So thank you very, very much. Okay, sure. Okay, sure. Yes, it was. Now, next on the agenda is the review of the President's recommended 6-year capital plan. President Kaler, I turn it over to you while I see that we have people coming to the table.
Our team is assembling indeed, Madam Chair.
Right,
Thank you,
good.
members of the board. I'm very pleased to bring forward for your review our 6-year capital improvement plan. This plan focuses mostly on renewal for the 29 million square feet that make up our university system. It's a plan that envisions using our space more efficiently and effectively so we can better decommission buildings and be good stewards of our funding and our environment. About 82% of the 6-year capital plan is committed, Regent Johnson, to the 3 R's: renovating, renewing, and replacing. The 6-year plan also aligns with the platform of excellence I shared with you many months ago, and a focus on operational excellence. The plan is similar to one you approved last year. It's a little bit smaller as we continue to assess and reassess the state's investment in the university. It includes some major strategic opportunities, leveraging the biomedical discovery district, investment in the St. Paul campus, and some activities on the Minneapolis campus. So for the details, I'll turn this over to Vice Presidents Fitzenreiter and Wheelock. Thank you.
Okay, welcome to the board.
Thank you, Madam Chair, President Kaler, members of the Board of Regents. I'm going to talk a little bit about the annual 6-year capital plan as soon as I can figure out how to move this to the... Are you going to operate the mouse for me? We have the technological aspects here. Thank you. All right, with that little tutorial, I'll spend a little time with our CIO a little bit later. Let's talk about what the 6-year capital plan is. What we're going to focus on here are years 2 through 6, which would be 2014 through 2019. The second or next item on the agenda will be the annual capital plan, and so we'll spend a little bit more time on the improvements that are scheduled during this next fiscal year. I will say, relative to timing, that this is a plan that is dynamic, not static. This plan will change. For the board's information, we did have to use some assumptions about the current legislative request, for example, pending in the 2013 legislative session. We presume, for the purposes of both the annual capital plan and the 6-year plan, that all of our requested items were approved by the legislature. Once we have some certainty about what does or doesn't occur in that setting, we will update those plans, bring them back at the June, both the Facilities and Operations Committee meeting and the full board accordingly. So this plan will evolve for that and a few other reasons between May and June. So this is the review. We have also looked at the President's interest in aligning our interest around the platform for excellence. And so we have taken that into consideration as we've helped evaluate some of the project requests. And just to illustrate that point, I'd like to point out a few of these. When we talk about the emphasis on research and discovery, two of the key projects in the six-year capital plan and in our legislative requests are the renovation, rehabilitation, and renewal, the 3 Rs of Tate Lab, and also looking at, in 2 phases, some investment in laboratory space on the St. Paul campus. This is a collaborative effort by the College of Biological Sciences, the College of Vet Medicine, and the College of Food, Agricultural, and Natural Sciences to look at what they need in laboratory spaces for similar types of work where that ability to collaborate between the principal investigators, faculty, and students in those 3 colleges would make sense. That will include not only the development of new space, but the renovation of existing space and the potential decommissioning of 1 or more buildings over on the St. Paul campus. Teaching and learning, obviously a key mission-related priority for the institution. As an example, we have a priority in the 6-year capital plan for a facility and investment in the at the Duluth campus in 2016. We will be spending some more time with the Chancellor to talk about how to best program that to make that investment in the most strategic way possible to advance their brand identity and mission at that campus. And then we also have some proposed funding in here in a couple of different years for system-wide improvements as we think about libraries and collections. What we are realizing is oftentimes libraries and collections, whether it's seeds or bugs or antique medical devices, are actually located in some of our prime real estate on the campus, and we don't need immediate access. We might need access, but it's space that we could probably use more strategically, either for student learning space, interactive classroom space, or other opportunities that are more directly related to enhancing our teaching and learning objective. Stewardship and our ROI, we'll talk about this more during our presentation, but as you know, we rely greatly on the state's interest in helping us provide the funds necessary to be good stewards of our physical assets. HEAPR is a key request to the legislative session each and every year of the legislative activity, both to improve our space and to complement it with other resources to actually improve the functionality and modernize the space. We are also looking at some of the opportunities with space currently used by the academic health center colleges. Once we have made the investment in the research facilities over in the BDD area and with the development of the ambulatory care center, it creates opportunities for us to improve space that it can be vacated and to think about some of that space as swing space to improve other adjoining space. So we have a placeholder in there for the improvement of the space once the space becomes freed up as faculty and staff move to other spaces that are created. And then, of course, we have Eddy Hall that's in our current legislative request, the oldest building on the East Bank that we would repurpose and allow us to look at some decommissioning of other space as well. Reputation, brand, and impact. We do anticipate during the 6-year capital plan that we will reach some milestones in enrollment at the Rochester campus. We do currently own land down there. We will be in discussions in the intervening years about how to think strategically about advancing our mission at that campus while still embracing the public-private partnerships that have been a hallmark for the development of that campus. We also have funds in here in the 2015 capital plan for replacement of the veterinary isolation labs. As you know, 100% of the degrees that are granted for veterinary medicine are granted by the University of Minnesota. This facility is outdated. It needs to be replaced, and it is something that really provides service throughout the state of Minnesota to advance our interest in animal sciences. Elliott Hall, which is the home, among others, of our psychology department and the Institute for Child Development, are also in the plan in 2018 for replacement spaces, given the outdated facilities that they are in now that lack functionality and efficiency. We also have a category called Other Projects Under Consideration. These are key academic or institutional priorities but need some additional work, either to think about the fundraising feasibility that may be associated with these projects, the impact on student fees, or just programmatically and physically the development of the projects needs some further consideration. These are examples. We have at Crookston a utility infrastructure update. At UMD, an interest in repurposing, renovating, and improving the current student center, an expansion at the Twin Cities campus of the Equine Center, an improvement in the dining capabilities on the super block here at the East Bank, and then the possibility of rethinking and redeveloping what we call the bridgehead, which is quickly becoming now with the advancement of light rail an entrance point and a key visibility area for the institution just at the intersection of the Washington Avenue and the bridge and the East Bank campus. So those are all under examples of projects that would be under discussion. It's very important to think about the context for the request. Given our reliance on state funding, which my colleague, CFO Fitzenbreiter, will talk about in just a moment, we looked at what might be some reasonable expectations about the size of a bonding bill and thought a little bit historically about what % of the bonding bill the University of Minnesota has typically taken back to the university. Perhaps a little large, but using as an estimate a $1 billion bonding bill in a big year and $500 million in the off year, we looked historically and believe that we are in the high 13% on average over the last decade or so, sometimes ranging from 10.9 into the 18%. So we used as a planning estimate 16%. This is actually a little bit more constraining than the parameters that we used for the 6-year plan last year. So there's a little bit higher funding assumptions in the previously approved plan. And I want to talk about the implications of that for just a moment. But you will see the emphasis continues to be very high on HEAPR funding as part of our annual request. And then with other state funds, we believe we can do several projects each year as part of our request to the state with the requisite 1/3 share that continues to be assumed for the university. Now, when I indicate that the 6-year plan that is being presented today for review is a little bit smaller than the 6-year plan last year, that is, again, because it is a dynamic document. We are not quite done with the development of some of the key projects in there. One example is the professional learning space and the needs of the medical school. There is an opportunity to really rethink the use of Deal Hall. We want to think about both the timing of that and its relationship within the institution. So the President has asked between now and the June meeting that we continue to work on developing a proposal, and that will be reflected then in the 6-year capital plan, more specifically by year and by project size. So that will be one example of work that is still continuing to develop. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Vice President Fitzenbreiter to talk a little bit about the financial implications of the 6-year plan.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, as you can see on this slide, the 6-year capital plan totals approximately, $1,117 million. Of that amount, as my colleague mentioned, the state ask dominates, as it does every 6-year capital plan that we have. The state ask dominates the proposal, and if you add the university share and the state share together, of that $1.117 billion, the combined university and state share is $1,083 million. So you can see how much it's dominated by that ask. If you turn to the next slide, you can see the respective 6-year plan by year. And you will notice in the bar charts that sort of I always get criticized for my colors. The darker charcoal reflects HEAPR requests. And you can see that in the even numbered years, the ask to the state will be larger, and it will be dominated by our HEAPR ask with smaller asks in the odd numbered years. If you go to the next slide, we discussed this one yesterday in the Finance Committee with respect to debt capacity. And when we do debt capacity, traditionally here, we've kind of benchmarked a couple of numbers. We have a methodology that does a long-range forecast of the finances of the institution, which we'll be bringing and updating as part of the President's recommended budget in the June meeting. But we do a point forecast with that projection for debt capacity, and then we also do ranges around that debt capacity, and those are based on Moody's benchmarks and the ranges around those benchmarks. And we do it with and without accounting for foundation assets. The rating agencies do our financial ratios, including the foundation assets, but for just bookends here, we do it both ways. You'll see without foundation assets that this capital plan uses up, in theory, uses up our debt capacity. I want to just make sure that people understand that this reflects as if every project happened on the schedule that it happens on, which doesn't always occur. Be wonderful, but doesn't. And it's really dominated you see on the chart, $478 million of debt being issued from both this 6-year plan, by the way, and this includes the annual capital budget that we're going to turn our attention to shortly. It's dominated really by 2 large projects that you've previously authorized, the Ambulatory Care Center project and the Combined Heat and Power project. 2 important projects, one of which, the Combined Heat and Power project, will actually save the university money over the long term, and the Ambulatory Care Center project that has an external funding source associated with it. So if you remove those 2 projects and think about them uniquely, our debt capacity is not a negative without foundation assets. It's actually positive $136 million. And the 723 with foundation assets moves to $961 million. You can also see the range around there. I can say confidently to the board that this 6-year plan will not adversely affect the university's credit rating. And with that, Madam Chair, we'll just turn quickly to the next slide. How does the 6-year plan impact both operating costs and debt service? Over the life of this 6-year plan, if all the projects occur, the cost of the university will be about $22.8 million. 64% of that, $14.6 million, is associated with debt, about $8.2 million in operating costs. These are, again, preliminary estimates, and they mature as each project comes along. The debt level here is, and the fact I say this about the debt capacity as well, it's assumed that all of those projects are debt financed, and the reality is that through fundraising and local resources, the projects do not all end up debt financed. The university has been very creative. There are fundraising opportunities that come along for projects. This really shows you a maximum level based on the 6-year plan. If we turn to the next slide, I'll turn back to my colleague and move on.
So, Madam Chair, just to again recap, this is a work in progress. We will be back here in June with an updated both annual capital plan and 6-year plan, and that will be presented again to the Facilities Committee and Operations Committee and the full board for approval.
Thank you for this updated 6-year capital plan. Are there questions or comments, or would the board rather go to the annual plan and then ask questions as a group? All right, well, please stay at the table, and then President Kaler will turn to the annual capital budget. And President Kaler, do you have some opening remarks on that?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Very briefly, the board does, of course, historically and wisely recognize the importance of sustaining our infrastructure to meet our core missions. This capital plan does that, and I believe you'll see it is, again, in line with your previous expectations. So, Vice Presidents Wheelock and Fitzenreiter, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, President Kaler, and members. This is actually the small box on the left hand. So this is year 1 of the 6-year capital plan. And year 1 of the 6-year capital plan is really the projects we intend to do in the next fiscal year, include projects per Regents policy over $500,000 that have a completed redesign, and they must be fully funded before they proceed, and as well approved projects move into design or construction. We have a threshold as well for schematic review as necessary in the Board of Regents policy for projects over $2 million or with a key visual impact. So many of these projects will be reviewed as well by the Facilities and Operations Committee during the course of the year. As I mentioned earlier, we do have a pending request before the legislature. We have presumed that all of those requests have been funded for the purposes today of the proposed plan before you, and that will again be updated before we come back to the June meeting. Just to refresh everyone's memory, this is what we have requested in the current year. So when you look at the annual capital plan, you will see the space holder for $125 million HEAPR projects, and then all of the individual projects, either for complete construction, design, or the funds for the laboratory improvements or the active learning classroom space. The legislature will adjourn by May 21st, and so we will have time to reflect those decisions in our updated plan and submit those for June action. Let me just kind of review a little bit the use of the HEAPR projects, given the predominance that that has in our annual capital plan. There are very specific guidelines about what HEAPR funds can be used for, and we are regularly required to submit to the legislature our use of the funds, the speed with which we use those funds, and also oftentimes have some Office of Legislative Auditor interest in did we comply with state requirements about how those funds were used. The funds are really intended to preserve and renew physical structures around key structural elements such as improving accessibility, the building systems, energy efficiency, code requirements, and issues like the building envelope, the external envelope, the roof replacement. So these are intended to be about preserving the core integrity of the physical structure and complying with code and some accessibility improvements. So those are very important funds for an institution that has a number of old and aging buildings on its campuses, and this is very important system-wide. These funds are allocated system-wide, but they cannot do everything, and so that we need to supplement those with either fundraising opportunities or institutional debt in order to actually improve the functionality and expand the space as necessary to meet our needs, and yet they are core funding for our annual plan. As I mentioned, we have reflected the request for $125 million, and we'll adjust both the size and the specific projects once we have a better sense of what will be funded. But you can see from this suggested list of projects that these are improvements that are across the system and are very important projects on our campuses. Knutson on UMC, Heller Hall at UMD, and also some of our research and outreach centers, et cetera. So it is used across the system and is really critical, meets critical needs. So some of the other projects that we have listed in the capital improvements budget, and I should say as well, we will have an update in the capital improvements budget if indeed the Board of Regents approves the Vikings lease. That will be another change in the annual capital improvements to allow those improvements to proceed. But we have repair and replacement funds that are, again, system-wide funds. Those are internally generated funds that are used to supplement HEAPR for maintenance needs. And then we have a variety of projects that are listed here, some of which are financed with student fees. We have a work that's going on in Dunhow to think about space utilization and look at some work plus opportunities to take a square footage of space and to use that more efficiently and to increase our productivity, have more staff that can conduct their work there, and often in a more collaborative fashion. As many of you know, we are updating the parking ramps and the garages to improve our lighting, both to improve the effectiveness of the lighting and to improve the energy efficiency. And we're making improvements at the Raptor Center at the St. Paul campus to the outdoor holding cages for our Raptor Center and other important investments that are being made.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, this slide provides a summary of the funding sources for the projects in the annual capital improvement budget. Local funds in this case, $11.6 million, represent funds from academic departments and support units through resources they've generated. Grants and gifts are pretty self-explanatory. University funds in this case really means funds through an internal loan from the central pool, central reserves, funds budgeted annually for specific purposes like the R&R fund. The self-supporting funds, of course, are auxiliary units, business units at the university, housing, parking, et cetera, are in that category. State debt's self-explanatory, and as well as university debt. You turn again to the next page. Again, in the Finance Committee yesterday, we did review this. The $276 million in the blue bar here for both with and without foundation assets is really dominated not so much by the annual capital improvement budget that's before you, but reflective of previous projects authorized, and that's the combined heat and power and the ACC, which itself is $250 million of that 276. And then the next item is the resolution.
All right, thank you. Are there questions, comments from the board? Regent Omari.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and for that presentation. So I heard an interesting comment from a student last week, and I was fascinated that a student leader said, I am less concerned about how nice our buildings look. And I'm thinking, well, in order to provide quality education, we need nice facilities and teaching facilities and things like that. And then that made me think about student fees and paying for some of the capital plan. And I'm wondering what type of conversation happens in this process when we're thinking about student fees, paying for some of these, and how we message the value that's added by having the proper facilities. And then tying that in also to the potential tuition freeze and ensuring that the perception is not that we're just going to hike student fees to supplement that.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, historically, student fees have not been a big component of the capital plan or capital projects at the university. It's fairly rare. There was certainly a student fee for the stadium, and there has been a student fee, capital enhancement fee for rec facilities. Traditionally, they're very specific for a capital project. They do not, in general, support the capital plan of the university, and that's traditionally how we've approached it. If we do one, it's very targeted, focused, and discussed considerably with the student government.
Follow-up question?
If I may. Thank you, Madam Chair. On, I don't have a slide number, but in the budget, in the different types of funds, local funds, grants, and gifts, where would a student fee, if it were being contributed, fall? This slide, yes.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, probably in university funds is where we put it.
Okay, Regent Beeson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think the presentation was fine. Now that I've been on the board going on 5 years, my frustration with this process is that we tend to get projects showing up that haven't been on the 6-year plan. And so the ACC or the power plant, maybe even Northrop or the new housing project, seem to sort of show up, and it's very dynamic. The needs change, and I've been in business, I understand really 6 years is too long of a time to count on for projects, but really looking to you, Vice President Wheelock, to tell us that there's asteroids sort of hurling their way toward the university, big infrastructure costs that the state's unlikely to fund, or the students are unlikely to fund, or we're not going to be able to fundraise for. That is, and so we're presuming in this, that there's going to be no new major housing projects in the Twin Cities, and that's a big assumption to make. It means we're going to keep the quad area. There's nothing in there necessarily for Rochester, part of the destination project. We're going to be part of that. We're part of the planning for that. We're looking, big projects that are not on the radar screen that just tend to sort of appear and for which there might not be a lot of room.
Madam Chair, Regent Beeson, I appreciate the comments, and I think I would add a couple of things. First of all, let me just say, we do have in 2018 $55 million for Rochester, but you're right that this is an involvement in that community discussions down there, a partnership with Mayo, and there may be opportunities before that. And I think one of the fabulous things about this institution is it is a very dynamic place, and oftentimes we are challenged about the opportunity, for example, of a major research grant that will require some improvements to physical space in order to conduct the elements of the research. And so there are things like that that can't really be fully anticipated that will move something fairly quickly to a priority status. And this is part of why we update the 6-year plan each year so that we can try to reflect both changing expectations and new opportunities and to some extent new challenges. We will be spending some time during the summer months, and I expect that the work that we do in university services to think about space planning, space prioritization, and to work with other parts of the institution on, better identifying and planning for our physical space needs, reflecting physical space as a strategic asset, will also roll into the President's strategic planning process later in the year. So I appreciate the comments. We try to be as planful and anticipatory as possible, but there's a lot happening at this institution that creates, immediate opportunities. And we will be spending some time on a couple of categories that we know are emerging. For example, your comments about the housing on campus. We will be spending over the next year or two some time updating our assumptions about what's going on with the housing market, what that means about our own physical space, and with some knowledge that we have some aging facilities, particularly on the superblock area, and that we're going to take a closer look at as well.
Thank you. President Kaler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I completely agree with everything Vice President Wheelock has just told you. The only small thing I would add, too, is that we are coming to a focus around reuse and renovation that is bringing the idea of efficiency and resource reduction into the conversation a little bit more vigorously. And so you'll see that begin to marinate through the process as we go forward.
Regent Allen.
I just wanted to follow up on Regent Omari's question, and I think Mr. Fitzenreiter answered it specifically in terms of the use of fees for projects. But I wanted to point out something different. When you're talking about keeping up current buildings, it's been proven over and over again that it's far cheaper to keep them up to date regularly rather than to have to redo them completely. So indeed, while it may seem like you're putting money into something in a given year that maybe could be put off, and then you get into the habit of putting it off, and in the long run it costs you a lot more. And there are some very sophisticated studies that have been done on that, particularly those by the Association of Physical Plant Administrators, and you can find those or someone can find them for you. I think we have a very good report in the Facilities Condition Report that gives us a lot of information on that subject. And I just wanted to emphasize that you start putting it off, you get into what's called deferred maintenance, and you end up spending more money, which costs everybody, including the students, a little more.
Thank you. Regent Frobenius.
I would like to go back to Regent Beeson's comments. And I have a sense that with a new president and Vice President Wheelock new into her position, we are looking at a number of our processes for how we plan. And the 6-year plan is always been sort of an intriguing question, and it has evolved to a sort of a wish list based upon those projects that we are committed enough to believe we're going to spend some preliminary architectural money on to design and nail down the costs a bit. But we also simultaneously are developing our long-range financial planning process to be a bit more sophisticated process. And within that process, there is a key question that begins to be asked is, given our various assumptions about the future over the next 5 to 6 year period of time, what is our capital capacity? How much can we take on in additional debt and facilities? And I think that I'm hopeful as these processes evolve, that will become an equally important part of this process as we put together our needs and put together our capacity. Recognizing there's a big question mark about what the level of the state might be along the way, but we can work with that number however it comes out. So I just wanted to add that thought to your comments.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Vice President Wheelock, Vice President Fitzenreiter, for your update on the capital planning and budgets, and these were for review, and we will take action on them next month. Now we're going to talk a little bit or learn a little bit more about the Committee on Institutional Cooperation. When Regent Larson, actually it was Regent Larson met with FCC leadership a few months ago, they mentioned how important the Committee on Institutional Cooperation is to the faculty. And I thought it would be helpful for the board to learn a little bit more about this entity and how it supports the work of the university. So Provost Hanson, we're interested to learn more about CIC.
Thank you very much, Chair Cohen. The Committee on Institutional Cooperation was formed more than 50 years ago, apparently with a slight nudge from the Carnegie Corporation, when the head of the Carnegie Corporation at the time was talking to one of the Big Ten university presidents and said, "You guys get together frequently, but all you talk about is football, and you could be using your time wisely." And he pointed out that they talked about a lot of things in addition to football, but they began to form a more purposeful academic collaboration. And the presidents deputed the chief academic officers to be the members of this. That is the CIC. It's a committee essentially appointed by the presidents. But it is now the most long-lived and the most robust academic collaboration in the world, really. And it's a remarkable institution, and I want to explain a little bit right now about why. It is, as I say, formed out of the Big Ten, the institutions that are in the Big Ten Athletic Conference, with the addition of the University of Chicago, which had withdrawn from the Big Ten about 12 years, I think, before the forming of the CIC, but then was invited back into the CIC. And I think there's great virtue in having that great private university as part of the CIC. The members meet together in a variety of ways, and they involve themselves in a variety of important partnerships. The partnerships have a number of interesting qualities. They are always completely voluntary. It's not as if the CIC has regulatory authority over any of these institutions. They retain their autonomy completely, and the partnerships are begun with all willing members. And some proceed with all of the members involved, some don't. But the criteria that define the partnerships are these, that they address member needs in some way, and each university has to acknowledge or feel that the partnership will indeed be useful to it. They create new opportunities through aggregation of resources. One of the great examples of that is the Omnipop network. That's an optic network collaboration between the participating CIC institutions, and it connects them to one another, particularly for broadband and intensive data sharing through very high-speed connectivity and a cable that runs fiber cable circling downtown Chicago. It has multiple access points, so researchers can share data of a sort that really is intensive. The library collaborations are very important. I'll say a bit more about them in a minute. One of the other interesting elements of the
collaborations is one that actually connects both the CIC and the Big Ten, and that is the traumatic brain injury study. What has happened is that the institutions have shared their imaging resources and the research that's being done on brain injury at each of these institutions in order to more effectively address the questions that are raised by traumatic head injury. It's now a collaboration that involves all of the Big Ten Athletic Conference and the participating universities of the CIC, the researchers, the trainers, the scientists, the team physicians, the coaches. The Traumatic Brain Injury Research Collaboration began in 2010. In June of 2012, the Ivy League researchers noticed the importance of this collaboration and joined, so that the Ivy League, both athletic conference and the researchers in the Ivy League, have joined the CIC Big Ten institutions to pool academic resources to better understand these injuries, to prevent them, and to ameliorate the difficulties when they occur. The communities of peers that are formed out of the CIC, here we're talking about brain injury researchers, are found at almost every level of the academy. Almost every department connects with its peers in the CIC. The administrative structures of the university connect with their peers in the CIC. And that's incredibly important. People end up sharing best practices, and when people have a solution to a common problem, and we have a lot of common problems, we are able to diffuse those solutions quickly, easily, and in an informal way. I want to give you a little short background about the CIC that's been prepared by the CIC itself. So we have a little video to show you.
Students and nearly 337,000 undergraduate students. Research and development expenditures top $8 billion. CIC member...
Sorry.
For more than 50 years, the strength of our member universities has grown immensely. Today, CIC schools host more than 38,000 full-time faculty members, over 102,000 graduate students, and nearly 337,000 undergraduate students. Research and development expenditures top $8 billion. CIC member universities award almost 15% of all doctoral degrees, 16% of engineering PhD degrees, and over 23% of all agricultural PhD degrees granted in the U.S. each year. Over time, CIC has harnessed its collective power to substantial ends. With a small staff operating from Champaign, Illinois, and reporting to the university provosts, our strength comes from the shared knowledge of peer groups that include university's top technology officers, chief librarians, purchasing directors, deans of arts and sciences, research vice presidents, graduate deans, and many others. Together, these leaders have hammered out agreements on issues such as sharing access to study abroad programs, negotiating better prices for common purchases and electronic licenses, and creating programs for faculty leadership development. The results in many instances have been transformative. Recent cooperative infrastructure contracts to enhance network capability have yielded savings of over $3.2 million annually and provided the school's top information engineers with a sense of shared risk as they embarked on a bold new technology venture. CIC member schools have also leveraged their buying power to realize annual savings of $5.5 million on contracts for commodities and services, and an additional $6.5 million annually in electronic content licensing. Faculty and students are benefiting tremendously from collaborative research initiatives and inter-university course share programs. And in the near future, information technology enhancements and library digitization projects will enable scholarship that many of us have only imagined, fundamentally enhancing both research process and outcome. The key strength of our coalition is that it leverages both investments and ideas. Our joint projects reflect an understanding that there is power in shared purpose, and that through an aggregation of our resources, we can achieve far more together than any one individual campus could ever hope to do alone. The efficacy of this approach can be seen in the growing array of transformative programs that expand educational opportunities, advance research, enhance efficiency, reduce costs, and amplify our impact in the wider world. For over half a century, leaders of the CIC universities have wisely recognized that no single institution has sufficient faculty, funding, or facilities to meet the escalating challenges of higher education. We've built the most sophisticated collaborative infrastructure in American higher education, and together, we are creating the research university of the future.
I just want to emphasize again that these are powerhouse universities, and then together their impact is huge. Again, this is a much bigger entity than I think the nation at the moment tends to realize. Our 13 institutions award 15% of all PhDs earned in the United States, 16% of all engineering PhDs, 23% of all agricultural PhDs. I mean, it is the research infrastructure for the nation. 500,000 students annually educated, undergraduate, graduate, and professional students. The $8.4 billion in funded research that these institutions together engage in compares, just to make some invidious comparisons, with the Ivy League's $4.5 billion. The University of California system is $5.4 billion. This is a huge collective of universities with a huge impact on the nation and the world. And the structure of the CIC, informal and yet impactful, has benefits at every level. I want to mention a number of the things that were just alluded to in the video. The benefits for students include enhanced research opportunities. They have summer research opportunities and grant programs that are particularly dedicated to drawing in underrepresented minorities into research. There are shared programs abroad. All of our institutions have study abroad programs, but we don't have them in every single country. We have seamless ways of having students from our institutions use vetted, recognized programs from other institutions within the CIC. The Course Share initiative is, I think, another one that actually highlights what's particularly useful about this kind of collaboration. No university can teach all of the languages that there are in the world, but the CIC institutions actually are pretty important in terms of teaching languages, but the most any institution has taught at any particular time is about 70. That's a huge number, but it doesn't cover the full span of things that people might be interested in learning. We share those courses with one another, particularly effective in the less commonly taught languages realm, so that if we have a Pashto or Hindi course that is not taught at every university, and every one of our universities doesn't want to put the resources into teaching it, our students can still learn those languages through the sharing of those courses across our institutions. And this is all done in a tuition-neutral, very bureaucratically minimal way. That people get credit for that in their own institutions. They don't have to engage in a lot of difficult admissions processes in order to do this. We have reciprocal library borrowing from all of our institutions, and these are huge library resource collections across this collective. And faculty, staff, students can borrow resources from any of these institutions, in person or physically checking out books. Students are provided with free apps, particularly, again, there are a number of outreach programs in order to increase the pipeline for underrepresented minorities in our schools. We all recognize this is an issue, and we all know we can be more effective at addressing this issue if we work together. So the free app process for graduate education is one of the ways in which we try to encourage students to enter our university systems. The CIC doctoral directory is something that's put together with in order for hiring units in our various universities, but also around the country, to find the students coming from underrepresented groups who might fit the particular faculty needs that any university might possibly have. And again, our pooling that information is what makes this effective, and we do it again in a voluntary way. The faculty have any number of benefits. Most of them, I think, actually come through the faculty communities of interest, but the library and technology collectives are also important. The course share programs are important if you're in those areas, and we actually intend to beef up some of the course share opportunities now that MOOCs are on the scene, and the CIC is exploring its own approach to MOOCs. We have a number of academic leadership development programs, and many of the administrators, including department chairs from our institutions, have gone through these programs, and it helps train people in things that they aren't necessarily trained in their PhD programs, and I think makes them more effective in those roles. I have myself been through one of those a long time ago in the Department Executive Officer Program, and we want to say a little bit about the Academic Leadership Program, which is managed at every one of our schools, and I think provides opportunities that our faculty wouldn't have in any other way. So we have shared programs and resources. We learn from one another. We develop the leadership that I think serves the not just our institutions, but higher ed in this country as a whole. And we have purchasing savings. There was a mention of the consortial approach to purchasing. This is particularly significant in the realm of library resources and digital resources, but it runs the gamut from finding contractors for e-verify services and background checks to dorm mattresses. I mean, we do a lot of this through consortial purchasing that the CIC helps organize, and a great deal of money is saved every year. And the institutions voluntarily take the lead on various of those shared purchasing services. Someone from one of the institutions will be the purchasing officer for all the institutions that want to participate in that. So what it means for Minnesota, our students at the University of Minnesota have connections to a huge academic community through things like course share, things like the Traveling Scholar Program. For graduate students who have a desire to work with a faculty member at another institution within the CIC, there are arrangements, again, with minimal bureaucratic fuss, which will allow them to go there, get credit for taking courses or having some dissertation advising from another one of our institutions. And again, because no institution in this day and age can be all things to all people, it's enormously helpful to our students to have this opportunity. I have both sent students there, and I have had students come to me to work on various projects, and it's a benefit I think you couldn't find in any other system. These kinds of collaborations, I want to say a little bit more in a minute about how they proceed at every level, but again, that's something that in a way you have to experience to see the benefits of, but I've seen it at every level, both as an associate professor, as a department chair, as a dean, and as the provost. It allows us to really to learn about best practices, to share our successes and our failures, and so that people don't have to make the same mistakes twice. And there's a spirit of cooperation. That's one of the things that I really want to emphasize. That is, I think, unlike anything else in higher education. we wanted to have at least one person here who had been through one of these programs that the CIC offers. Is Renee here? Hi. Renee participated. Renee is head of the School of Architecture in the College of Design, and she was an academic leadership fellow in 2006. It's a program run by the CIC. Each institution that wants to participate nominates people for it because they see that they have leadership ability and/or they're already participating well in a number of leadership initiatives within their own universities, and then they come together through this program. And Renee could say a few words about it.
Thanks for having me. I think Karen probably asked me because I've led our faculty to a number of nationally recognized innovations in our curricula, and I think that in some ways that's been made possible by my understanding the current systems at the U, how to work within those, but to still find ways to do things that might be a little different than what has been normally done in, say, our School of Architecture. And also it allowed me to build some leadership strategies and tactics that I think have been really effective for me over the course of the time since I was in that program. So just generally, the program, as Karen mentioned, they're nominated from within the departments and colleges. And there's about 4 to 5 chosen from each institution each year. So that cohort becomes the leadership group across all the CIC for that year. But we also become a cohort within the U of M of all the previous ALP fellows that were chosen in previous years from the University of Minnesota. And so that cohort also meets fairly regularly on campus, and together we can form a resource to the university as well as network for each other. I think that one of the benefits is that it's actually really nice to be recognized by your home institution. A lot of times you go and you get invited to speak at all these other institutions and you don't necessarily get the recognition of being a fellow at your own home institution. So that I think is nice, and then you begin to connect because the university is so huge. So you can connect with 4 or 5 people, or you can connect with 15 or 20 people, and so you can start to develop your own networks that might be totally across disciplinary lines that you would not normally be experiencing. We have small group discussions. When the year that you're a fellow, you get a lot of access, very open access, to people that normally are just the name behind the email. So you would be meeting with the head of human resources, the head of the financial group, and they'll talk a little bit about the larger context about how decisions are made here at the U. And then in the seminar groups that you meet with across the CIC, you might hear from other institutions what their provost does or what their HR person does. So you begin to understand how the U handles certain aspects that do affect us in a much larger scale, and then also how other institutions handle those same things, so that you can begin to get a sense of the relative values, shared values, and differences. And that is really valuable because you get a lot of emails as a department head, and you don't always know which policies are just like things that really relate more to academic health and don't really relate to architecture, relate more to the PhD programs, not to our professional programs. And just sorting all of that out and understanding that larger context for how the University of Minnesota makes decisions and then how that compares to other universities, I think is probably my most important takeaway from that program. You also get a lot of really useful information. When you're first becoming a department head, and the ALP I think is aimed at people that are kind of new in their leadership positions, you are no longer peer with your own faculty group, and so it can actually be kind of lonely those first couple years, and so it gives you a chance to network with others here on campus and across the other CIC campuses to be able to talk candidly about sometimes really challenging issues that might be facing you, and knowing where you're going to get into trouble legally or in HR issues, and because we're really familiar with teaching and faculty issues and research issues, but we don't always get the training that we need in that, and so that is really great to have early in your career and know who you can go to and know where those lines are that you need to be extra careful. I think in general it also helps with retention of leadership talent. I was there in 2006 and I'm still here now, still happy and still feeling connected with the university and understanding, even with the leadership changes of the provost and president, still feeling like I understand at that higher level how my work as a department head fits in with the larger mission of the university. So thank you.
Thank you, Renee. This is one way in which the peers connect across disciplines and for particular purposes. I just want to emphasize again the peer group connections are incredibly important, and often at this point, because of the robustness of the CIC, do not require any CIC intervention or actual support, even minimal support. When I was a department faculty member, not yet the chair once couldn't go to the CIC meeting of philosophy chairs, so he deputed me, and I had no idea that we actually always met, talked about what we were doing with graduate fellowships, how the recruiting was going, what we were offering as starting salaries, how the Gen Ed curriculum was developing on our individual campuses. The philosophy group was not supported in any way by the CIC, but we saw ourselves as the CIC philosophy group, and we met at our professional meetings, so there was no cost that we would be going to our professional meetings anyway. Many of our peer group communities are just like that. They recognize themselves as a particular collective and an important collective, and they benefit from their interactions, but in fact they are self-organizing, but under the umbrella of the CIC. For the CIC itself, again, what we have always tried to emphasize are these flexible agreements. They are voluntary cooperations with autonomy. Each institution has autonomy, and we enter into things as we see fit for our own institutions. It's a very interesting model of cooperation in a context of competition, because we are competitive with one another. We're competitive for students, for faculty, for awards, for grants. But we also see possibilities of cooperation on all these fronts, and a collective interest in the national and the global position of all our member universities. We're in fact much more purposefully engaging right now in outreach to show the economic and intellectual impact of the work these universities do and our standing in the world. On this cooperation competition thing, I can give you one very small but important example that happened a long time ago. In December of 1963, the CIC declared a closed season on faculty recruiting from May to September. This is something that's now been adopted by the AAU. Competition is fierce to get the best faculty as the faculty recruiting seasons are going on, but you also know you can be harmed if on August 31st, one of your key faculty is taken away and raided by another university. There was an agreement not to do that anymore. From May to September, no institution could pull away a faculty member from anywhere without the explicit agreement of the institution. And that is now a practice that's followed by actually all the AAU institutions, that there has to be permission given by the institution if there is any final agreement for faculty hiring that is signed after May. But you can see how important it is actually to the self-interest of each institution, but there are elements of self-interest that are running counter to one another. It's a civilized, courteous, and much more orderly way to proceed with faculty hiring. And that's something that has come from the CIC. There are important levels of trust. Renee mentioned the importance of the candid conversations people feel they can have. That's not available everywhere, and it's a very special thing. The CIC actually is in many ways, if you allow me to make a dip back into my philosophy background, it is a social compact of a very special sort that people don't see as necessarily realized in any real-world setting. Not a Hobbesian one where life is without it is nasty, poor, brutish, and short, but one more like the ones described by John Locke, where people, the institutions retain their identity, retain all their rights, but they come together because they know they can be safer and more productive and achieve more if they form a collective. So I will close this part of the presentation with a quote from really one of the moving forces behind the institution of the CIC, Herman Wells, who said, "Academic isolation has long been impractical. In today's world, it's impossible." This is actually something he said in the 60s. You can imagine how much more true this is today. At a time when yesterday's bright new fact becomes today's doubt and tomorrow's myth, no single institution has the resources or facilities to go it alone. The university must do more than just stand guard over the nation's heritage. It must illuminate the present and help shape the future. This demands cooperation, not a diversity of weaknesses, but a union of strengths. And I think that's actually what we have. So, thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Provost Hanson, for that very enlightening report. And it seems to me that CIC could be a model for our world today. And thank you for the philosophy lesson, too. So now I will open it up to questions or comments from the board. Regent McMillan.
Thank you, Chair Cohen, and thank you, Provost Hanson. This is one of those things that's a little under the radar screen, and you've lifted it up. And I think a comment and a question, that quote was tremendous, because what I heard with the language example you gave, teaching, not so taught languages, at some point we got to do less or do things differently with the limited resources we have, and that may be we talk often about what we can do with MnSCU and elsewhere, but this looks very concrete and very practical and very real as a way to do the same amount or maybe even more with less. So glad to hear that. And here's the question. You talked about the Ivy League a couple times. Are there other CICs, like the SEC or the Western universities? Does anybody else do this, where they informally collaborate this well?
Yes, a number of academic collaboratives have sprung up since the CIC, but actually none of them has they've sprung up and they've fallen back. None of them has had the staying power and the effect that the CIC has had. But people do recognize, and they sometimes spring up for particular purposes and then fall away. But the benefits of a consortium like this are huge, and no one else no other set of institutions in the country has developed anything with the long-lasting power of the CIC.
Regent Beeson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Provost. It was and Dr. Cheng for the really helpful presentation. And this may go into the sort of the competition part of the cooperation match, but has CAC or maybe AAU thought of getting into sort of the comparative cost data work, since there's not as much confidence on the IPEDS, the national data? Either one of those bodies willing and able to sort of help develop shared sort of comparative data on costs? Seems to me that would be they're obviously peer groups, both organizations.
Chair Cohen and Regent Beeson, yes, we have among the peer groups and at the member level shared a lot of cost information. We haven't done a lot publicly with that, and it is on the mind of the members right now, because we all know that there is a lot of public skepticism about some of these issues. I can also say, actually, I'm on the planning committee for this year's AAU Provost meeting, and that is one of the topics under consideration, what we can do to respond to effectively as a group to those kinds of questions.
Regent Frobenius.
I too find a lot of value in this concept, and I'm glad. Thank you very much for the update. Regent Beeson's question is just intriguing to me, because there really is a crying need in higher education, at least from my 10 years of governance at the university, of having some sort of other comparable data to look at. And having been in other industries where that exists, it's frustration that it's not available. And I think anything you can do to advance that cause would be great. On a slightly different point, you commented about this sort of getting permission to recruit from other institutions. And are we sure we've got that fully legally vetted, and that we're not stepping in any strange potholes with that particular type of practice among these institutions?
Well, I've got to be honest, I haven't vetted it with anybody, but I've engaged in that practice at any number of instances where what usually happens is that some attempt at recruitment has been going on for a very long time, and then it's finalized, after May 1st. And what usually happens is that the institution actually does know that something is going on there, and so they're not utterly surprised by it. But it is a courtesy, and people are told that up front. It's a courtesy that actually all members of the academy ought to see benefits them in some way. I realize you're thinking about the position of the faculty member who may be under recruitment pressure, but often these kinds of moves from one institution to another take a very long time anyway, and they're well aware that it has an impact on their old institution and their new one, and there are benefits to them of their new one operating under the same courtesies.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor Chang, for your personal experiences, and Provost Hanson for that enlightening report. And now I will go on to the committee reports. Regent Beeson, report of the Audit Committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The committee approved the external audit contract and unanimously recommended approval with Deloitte & Touche, which includes engagements with external audit firms, them and others that exceed $25,000. I move its approval.
Second. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Madam Chair, on non-action items, the committee discussed and received information on the external auditor review, the external audit plan, the risk profile of the university's technology enterprise, that being our third such risk profile this academic year, which provided an overview of risks associated with social networking, cloud computing, the enterprise system upgrade, and other technology initiatives. A presentation on the university's data security framework, and finally, one information item pertaining to the report on audit and non-audit services and fees. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Regent Beeson. All right, I have the report of the Academic and Student Affairs Committee. The committee unanimously recommends approval of the revised consent report, which includes new academic programs and program additions, program deletions and discontinuations, and program changes. I move adoption of the consent report. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. The motion carries. And the non-action items of the committee also reviewed proposed changes to Board of Regents policy, tuition and fees, and learned about the comprehensive fee study that led to the changes. The committee received an analysis of undergraduate income distribution trends in response to the December 2012 report of the student representatives. We heard a wide-ranging report on the principles and status of graduate and undergraduate academic program review, and we received an update on efforts to restructure and strengthen graduate education and discuss the university's graduate education vision for the future. The next committee, the report of the Faculty and Staff Affairs Committee, Regent Beeson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On behalf of Chair Simmons, I have this report, three action items, first being the annual promotion and tenure recommendation. The committee unanimously recommends approval of the promotion and tenure recommendations presented by the senior academic officers of the University of Minnesota. These actions become effective with the beginning dates of individual terms of appointment in 2013 and 14. I move approval of the promotion and tenure recommendations.
Is there a second? Second. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Aye. Motion carries.
Thank you. Secondly, continuous appointments and annual recommendations. The committee unanimously recommends approval of the annual continuous appointment recommendations. These actions become effective with the beginning of the 2013 and 14 appointment period. I move approval of the annual continuous appointment recommendations.
Is there a second? Second. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Third, revised consent report. The committee unanimously recommends approval of the revised consent report, which includes the appointment of William Donahue as General Counsel. I move adoption of that revised consent report.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, any discussion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We have a new general counsel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On non-action items, the committee also reviewed a proposed new Board of Regents policy on safety of minors, which was developed in response to recommendations in the free report in connection with the Penn State scandal. We also, and finally, heard each of our chancellors speak on a variety of issues and trends related to faculty on each of their campuses and how those trends link back to national issues and trends. The conversational panel discussion-oriented style of this agenda item was quite well received by the committee, and we appreciate their preparation and their delivery.
Thank you. Report of the Finance Committee, Regent Frobenius.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Under consent report, the committee unanimously recommends approval of the consent reports, which includes the purchases of goods and services over $1 million. I move its approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Under non-action items, the committee did discuss and receive information on the financial components of the President's recommended 6-year capital improvement plan, which totals $1.117 million, two-thirds of which is derived from the state contribution, one-third contributed by the university. The financial components of the President's recommended fiscal year 2014 capital improvement budget, which is being requested for a variety of projects, and additional HEPA funding totaled $289,774,000. Actual funding amounts have yet to be determined by the state legislature and will be updated at the conclusion of the legislative session. The Debt Management Advisory Committee will review the updated debt capacity of the university, which includes debt associated with the Ambulatory Care Center, in June. The Finance Committee will make a formal recommendation to the Board on the 6-year capital plan and the annual capital improvement budget at the June meeting, and that's part of our new procedures that we have adopted as a Board. We also received a report of purchasing and e-procurement update, an outgrowth of the Operational Excellence Program. The committee discussed recommendations issued by Graybird Advisors in fiscal year 2012 regarding strategies to optimize materials management and central logistics and implement some new e-procurement tools and technology. And quite a interesting and effective set of changes are being implemented. The U-Markets, as it is called, will commence operations in June and will act as an e-shopping environment for vendor supply and university stock materials, sort of an internal Amazon.com world, and it'll be quite interesting in process. We also spent some time on the subject of decentralization versus centralization, and we focused on the finance and budget function. The committee reviewed information related to centralization and decentralization of financial activities across the U. We discussed recent trends such as the clustered financial service model, which provides regional support for groupings of departments in the university, and a shared service model that can provide a range of administrative services to many units. And it's interesting to see the experimentation that is being done, experimentation and implementation of best practices that's occurring in these models. The Huron Administrative Benchmarking Study, which will be a benchmarking approach of many aspects of the university's operation with selected other institutions, will be completed in early June, containing additional recommendations and insights. We also looked at our normal information items pertaining to the progress of our quarterly investment advisory committee update, the quarterly asset management report, and the debt management advisory committee update. Madam Chair, that concludes my report.
Thank you. The Litigation Review Committee met on May 9, 2013. A resolution was considered and passed that authorized the closing of the meeting. In the closed meeting, a discussion was held of matters that are subject to the attorney-client privilege. And now the report of the Facilities and Operations Committee, Regent Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have two action items. The first, the committee voted unanimously to recommend approval of the schematic plans for the mechanical engineering building infrastructure remodel on the Twin Cities campus. I move its approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries.
Madam Chair and members, the second issue is the approving agreements with the Minnesota Vikings to play at Twin City Federal Bank Stadium. Before I move that, just clarification, this particular motion includes everything but the alcohol policy, which we'll deal with under a separate motion. And also, and Vice President Wheelock and Mr. Rotenberg, perhaps you want to approach the witness table, because last night at a Senate reunion, a number of people asked about this particular issue, and I was able to explain about the alcohol policy. And then the discussion came forth, what about Coke, Pepsi, and Gatorade? And you explained it to me yesterday, and a couple of my colleagues on this board asked me about it. I'm confused about Pepsi and Coke and Gatorade. Can you enlighten us, please, before I move the motion?
Madam Chair, Regent Johnson, thank you for the question. This is one element of the business practices of sports that seems to get a lot of attention, and we obviously know many individuals that are in one camp or the other about Coke or Pepsi products. But both in collegiate sports and professional sports, it's not unusual not only to have relationships with vendors for the use of their product, but also they are interested in promoting themselves to the fans and guests and visitors who attend the events at the facility, and to have some ability to market themselves. And that's typically called a sponsorship agreement. Sponsorship agreements can be structured many different ways, but it's not unusual for a product like Coke or Pepsi to seek to have exclusive visibility in the venue. At TCF, we have an exclusive sponsorship with Coke for the use and promotion of Coke products, and both the Minnesota Vikings and the league have relationships with Pepsi and with Gatorade. And so I'll ask our General Counsel, Mark Rotenberg, to talk a little bit about what are the specifics of the arrangements that have been worked out between the parties about visibility and rights within the building.
Madam Chair, Regent Johnson, so this, of course, is a big problem for Pepsi and Coke and Gatorade products and their respective financial interests. It's not a big problem for the University of Minnesota. We decided to let them work it out, but lots of lawyer time was consumed along with soft drinks in order to get this arrangement. The arrangement is as follows. Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola, and the parties, the University of Minnesota and the Vikings, have mutually agreed that Gatorade products will be allowed on the playing field and on the sidelines. Gatorade products and Pepsi products will also be allowed in one suite in the stadium, and Gatorade and Pepsi print ads will be allowed in Minnesota Vikings programs. In all other venues and in all other places of visibility, Coca-Cola products will be exclusive. And that is an accommodation that meets the university's contractual rights and obligations under its multi-year agreement with Coca-Cola, and satisfy the Minnesota Vikings and the National Football League, which also have contractual relations with Pepsi and Gatorade.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, that's what I intended to say.
To the Senate meeting last night. Yes.
With that, Madam Chair and members, I move adoption of the resolution.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Any questions? Yes, Regent Lucas.
I was especially pleased to see that the Vikings contributed some money to the neighborhoods surrounding the university, and I hope that some significant and long-lasting projects will come out of that to kind of commemorate this cooperation.
Okay, thank you. Regent Devine.
Didn't really see in the agreement, although I'm sure this is the devil's in the details discussion, it really gets into the whole issue of traffic control. We're going to have significantly more people coming on stadium, and maybe you might just address, I'm sure the issues come up in the discussions, although it isn't memorialized as such as part of the resolution. Maybe you could comment on what we're going to be looking at relative to those, the preparation for that.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Regent Devine. I would say two things about that. In the specific agreement, the Vikings are required to pay not only the agreed-upon rent or the elements that comprise rent, but also all of the game day operating expenses. So in other words, the University of Minnesota is held harmless about any additional expenses associated with that. That includes traffic management, and so those expenses will be covered. We have provided estimates to the Vikings for the different categories of game day expenses. The actuals will be what they are once we move into actually delivering those services. Secondly, I would add that we are actually going to engage the assistance of a traffic consultant to help us with large event traffic management planning and execution. And so in the next few months, we'll be getting some more feedback from a traffic management expert to help us improve or to either our management of the traffic or our pre-game planning for use of facilities and assignment of parking spots, et cetera. So we'll have more information both to assist us with this first Gopher season coming up this fall and also in preparation for the Vikings being here.
Okay, we have a motion on the table to accept the agreement with the Vikings. Is there a second? Second. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries.
Madam Chair, non-action items. The committee discussed and received information on the UMD Campus Master Plan, which defines the physical and conceptual framework for the campus as well as the long-term vision for the campus and short-term implementation goals. Secondly, project components of the President's recommended 6-year plan were reviewed. Thirdly, project components of the President's recommended 2014 capital improvement project. And finally, information on the final project review of the Reuse Center Engine Research Laboratories project. Madam Chair, members, that concludes my report on behalf of Facilities and Operations Committee.
Okay. I think there is no old business, so we will move on to new business, which is the selling of alcohol in the stadium with the Vikings. Yeah. Good. We are about to get the resolution. Thank you. Okay, this is a resolution related to alcohol beverage sales at TCF Bank Stadium, Mariucci Arena, Williams Arena during Vikings games. General Counsel Rotenberg, are you going to introduce the subject?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the board, for my last hurrah here, we're going to talk about intoxicating beverages at NFL football games. The resolution for your consideration this morning would authorize the sale of alcohol during Vikings games in accordance with the terms of Section 12 of the Facility Use Agreement you just passed a moment ago. That agreement was carefully negotiated with the Vikings and provides certain opportunities for the sale and service of alcoholic beverages in TCF Bank Stadium, Mariucci Arena, and Williams Arena to the extent that those facilities are being used by the Minnesota Vikings before and during their games. This resolution is before you pursuant to your exclusive and specific authority to regulate the sale of alcohol and the consumption of alcohol on University of Minnesota premises. And as you know, the legislature has granted to the Regents a number of licenses that are under your discretion to administer. And so that's why this is a separate resolution, and the lease terms require a separate action by the board to give effect to your wishes with respect to the service and sale of alcoholic beverages during Vikings games. So essentially, subject to applicable law and the limitations that are provided in the lease agreement that you just approved a moment ago, beer and wine may be sold throughout TCF Bank Stadium pursuant to the university's license. Beer, wine, and hard liquor may be sold in premium areas only. That means club seating, loge boxes, and suites pursuant to the university's license. And beer, wine, and hard liquor may be sold in the arena club rooms of Mariucci and Williams Arena pursuant to the university's license, to the extent that such space is made available for and actually used by the Minnesota Vikings prior to and during the games. No alcoholic beverages may be sold or served in the Minnesota Tribal Nations Plaza. And finally, the administration has the right under this proposed resolution and the power to approve all point-of-sale locations for alcohol in all of those locations. That's essentially what the resolution before you now provides.
I think we'll have a motion on the table, and then we'll have discussion. Is there a motion? Okay, it's been moved and seconded to accept the resolution, and now I'll open it up for discussion. Regent Johnson.
Madam Chair and Mr. Rotenberg, I know you and Vice President Wheelock spend a great deal of time negotiating this particular issue with the Minnesota Vikings. I compliment you on the fact that you have limited the beer and wine sales to the bowl section. Now, we may be criticized for that, but I view it this way. Most generally, it's games are played on Sunday, but more importantly, it's a university venue. We're on a university campus, and we are agreeing that they are our guests, and I know there was pressure from the Vikings to have a broader sale of alcohol, but I think you reached a good compromise, and I'm confident this will work. And perhaps I should have said this, Madam Chair, during the facilities report about the Vikings issue, but this is really an opportunity to showcase our beautiful football stadium on a national venue. Not only the teams, their visitors, but national TV as well. So this is a very, very good thing overall for the University of Minnesota. But I'm pleased to be able to support this resolution that's before us now, and I believe it's done in the right way, and the policies will be set forth in enforcement, which will work for all of us. So thank you to the two of you.
All right. Regent Frobenius.
A couple of points of clarification, and then a comment first. Are we dropping all the restrictions that we have placed on alcohol on sales in terms of not selling anything after the first half, which we had in place? This is a sort of an unrestricted right to do this, subject to the sales points being approved by us, but I assume they will be far more of them than exist in our current arrangements when we do this.
Madam Chair, Regent Frobenius, one of the positives of the relationships that exist for the University of Minnesota is that Aramark is also the vendor right now for the Metrodome. And Aramark will continue to be the vendor and will be selling and serving the alcohol. We will continue to insist, even if it isn't explicit, that we will have some measures that will control some of the behavior, as an example, establishing the set point for when the sale of the product should cease. So we will work through those operational issues, and if those aren't explicit, that will be one of the parameters that will be used before there's approval about the points of sale.
The comment I want to make is this is very appropriate to do. I'm supportive of the motion, And I'm trying to avoid the slippery slide that this doesn't become the precedent of how we may apply this to our own situation in subsequent years. This is two different worlds, two different situations. We're doing our best to be a good accommodator of a need in our community during this particular time, but we still have to figure out how to manage this best in our function as a university at a separate time. And I just want to make sure this isn't the first step down a slope that this becomes the precedent.
All right, thank you for those comments. I think we're ready to vote. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. And again, I want to thank Vice President Wheelock and General Counsel Rotenberg in your office for all the hard work on getting this very good compromise situation and getting the Vikings agreement. So thank you very much. I believe that the meeting is adjourned.